Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into a world that never really rests, where darkness greets you awake and tucks you in again, and the moments between feel borrowed at best. Your eyes find a ceiling you didn't pick, a thin mattress that isn't yours, and air thick with the scent of lie, coal grit, and strangers' histories. The morning's already rolling. Nobody asked if you were ready. You won't even believe it. There are times when 10 seconds of quiet feels like gold, scarcer than hot rolls or clean sheets. Alright, before we dive deeper, go on and hit that like button and subscribe. But only if it feels right. Drop a comment telling me where you're tuning in from and what hour it is in your corner of the world. Picture your clock ticking in an entirely different era. Kill the lights, turn on that fan for some atmosphere, and let's ease into tonight's story. You stir to something that isn't quite noise, more like an ocean tapping at your mind. Could be a chime, or the quiet shuffle of another worker's shoes down the hall, or maybe just the building itself, groaning and settling in the freeze. Your joints protest when you shift. The garret bedroom shows no mercy in the cold months, and the warm ones never bother climbing this high. You swing out of your cramped cot, feet hunting for the section of planks that won't bite, and tug on garments still holding on to yesterday's frost like a bitter memory. No delay option exists here. There's only the workday waiting deep in the belly of this place. Flames went out overnight, quiet as sparrows dropping mid-flight. Your task is bringing them back. You fold your arms close, guard your breathing like it's precious cargo, and creep through passageways that recall heat better than your body does. Down below the waxed floorboards, plumbing systems fantasize about scalding water they won't deliver for ages. You measure your steps through shadow to muffle the echo you can't quite silence. One cough would crash like breaking china. One plank would rat you out with a groan. You navigate like you're tiptoeing through a dozing beast by the cooking stove. You persuade last night's embers as though they might respond to kindness. Newspaper first, slim sticks next, then a cautious helping of coal. A glint replies like sharing a confidence. Gradually a shimmer emerges, a delicate dawn cupped between your palms. The aroma returns, familiar and risky both, and you exhale on it softly, waiting, like you're reviving a baby sparrow. When the blaze finally discovers its nerve, your digits have lost theirs. Down the hall, another worker's already hauling water, lifting it up and transporting it where it'll seem effortless later. You cross paths in the passage, like crew members on separate levels. Silent acknowledgements, a mutual inhale, no words because everything's understood already. One person's gaze appears more weathered than yesterday's. Someone else carries a hint of soap because she went to bed promising herself cleanliness. You monitor timepieces you don't possess and glass panes that clutch weather like resentment. Morning is speculation beyond the walls, a faint suggestion pressed against the window panes. In finer chambers, it'll shortly transform into theatre, daylight cascading over drapes that conveniently forget their coating of grime. Right now, it's your signal. You ignite lamps as if connecting stars, each filament a small vow. The hours ahead might cooperate if you're cautious and cautious again. You handle doors with care, matches with precision, your own presence with vigilance. You've discovered that these walls have awareness. They detect your exhaustion and reply with more tasks. They sense your dreams and trim them smaller. Before morning truly arrives, the hearth responds to you like something you've nursed to health. Up above, mattresses will shift where you'll never rest. Down below, cookware will clatter where you'll never dine. You clasp your palms together, attempting warmth in a method that barely succeeds, and consider how emptiness feels like a mechanism inside you, perpetually running fast. Hold on to this chill. You'll revisit it eventually. You'll grasp it clearer then. For the moment, the blaze needs another chunk. The lanterns want adjusting. The hallways want you absent. When the household properly awakens and acts like you never stirred at all, the building starts to stir, not with pleasure, but with demands, and you're already lagging. You dash to the washing room, where frigid water sits like mockery in a metal bowl. Your hands vanish into it, hunting for plates that got dirty long before you opened your eyes and somehow dodged washing themselves through the night. The cleanser is homemade, cheap, yielding, and reeks faintly of rendered fat. Your palms will broadcast that odour all day, a wordless marker of your rank. You scour without pausing, because pausing draws attention, and attention spells trouble. Somebody releases a blade onto the stone floor. No sorry, just the crash. You don't even twitch. That's earned. This resistance to racket, to dangerous implements, to abrupt noises. You've transformed into part of the building's infrastructure, essential, unseen, and only observed when something fails. Shortly, you'll assist with preparing the morning meal trays. This requires silence, nearly sacred attention. The bread must avoid being too charred. The spread must avoid being too melted. The silverware must whisper softly, never clatter. Any streak could trigger a speech, any tardiness, a pronouncement of failure. The head cook enters, breathing somewhat heavy, but her attention is already keen. She snaps something about the smoked fish. You gesture agreement, though the instructions weren't entirely clear. Your movements are already complying automatically. There's no opportunity to question. There's no room for speaking up. You're supposed to predict, to anticipate, to guess correctly. The previous girl who requested clarification got sent away before she'd finished drying the tea cloths. Then the corridor chimes start. They jingle like miniature monarchs summoning entertainers. One signals hot water needed, another shaving foam required, another somebody to part the curtains in precisely the correct manner so sunshine floods the correspondence table but avoids the carpet. You hustle, weaving around each other like backstage crew in a production. You'll never have seats to observe. Up the stairs, the morning commences for people who assume it hasn't already started. The lady prefers 2 lumps. Skip the cream. The gentleman wants a paper that hasn't been creased too firmly. The youngest daughter enjoys watching you perspire just slightly, just sufficient that she can grin behind her utensil. You maintain your gaze downward. You maintain your tempo quick. You maintain your thoughts tied tight as your apron cords. In one of the visitor chambers, somebody's knocked over a jug. You blot the spill before it touches the rug. An imported piece from overseas, they mention, though you've never seen the atlas. You recall last year's incident when a footman destroyed a carpet with boot wax and was quietly made to disappear. Word was he now shines shoes in some academy outside Manchester. Word also was he got discovered kissing the housemaid in the storage room. Regardless, he's gone now. You continue forward. You walk through a passage where a painting scowls at you, a woman with a pleated collar and the stare of somebody who never cleaned a single surface in her existence. She's been deceased 100 years, but you still feel evaluated. You straighten your cap, and still the chimes sound. You're needed in the office. You're needed in the eating chamber. You're needed everywhere except the place you came from. By this point your belly is murmuring, but the staff meal won't arrive until afterward. Everything upstairs is immaculate. Even then, the food will be tepid, consumed in rotations, perched on wobbly stools with damaged supports and no backrests. Nobody stays long. Staying put seems lazy staying seems, like behaviour only wealthy women display, arranged on fainting furniture with books you'll never purchase. As you hurry past the wall mirror in the corridor, you glimpse your image for an instant. You appear older than your years and somewhat bent, somewhat sunken around the eyes, but there's no moment to grieve vanished youth or gentleness. Not today. Today kicked off without your input once more. The initial genuine breath of heat touches your cheeks as you enter the main entrance hall. Though heat is being generous, it's the phantom of warmth from the sitting room fireplace, where the kindling was arranged by somebody else 2 hours back. Could have been you, could have been Ellen or John. At this time, identities smear like haze. You haul a container of fire starters under one elbow, your apron already marked with ash that'll stick to you like rumours. The entrance is lengthy, lined in buffed oak, with looking glasses that make it seem even more stretched, as though the building is observing itself expand. You're not supposed to appear in these reflections, but occasionally you spot a flash, your frame hunched, your hands busy, your vision not quite finding your own. You begin at the distant end. Sitting room office, piano room, daylight chamber. The building has more spaces than necessary, more hearths than it can maintain warm, and every single one requires hand lighting. First you drop to your knees. Then comes the ceremony. Empty the grate, brush the hearth, arrange the newsprint, the kindling, the coal, always in proper sequence, always neat, always balanced. A careless fire is an insult, a smoky one a transgression. The gentleman once erupted over smoke drifting through a door gap. You weren't even working that shift, but you recall the yelling. These incidents resonate, they mark the atmosphere. You work rapidly but carefully. Your digits are rigid, not from temperature now, but from doing this over and over. It's a routine your body recalls before your brain does the hardest part. You'll repeat it tomorrow and the following day. The blaze devours, and so must you. In the book room you hesitate. It's perpetually dim here, even on bright days, like the space resents illumination. Shelving sags beneath the burden of leather-bound volumes you're forbidden to handle. Once, way back, you grazed one while dusting it, and a placeholder fell out, a preserved blossom fragile as spun glass. You replaced it hastily, pulse racing, certain the entire bloodline of the household would descend on you for that lone moment of inquisitiveness. But nothing occurred that occasion. Now you kneel once more. Timber, coal, spark. The chamber breathes. There's a skill to passing through these areas without leaving evidence. Your footfalls must be feather light, your existence invisible, but your effort must radiate. A proper fire should appear as though it's been burning all evening, maintained by some kind phantom. You are that phantom, just sweatier. You walk past a bell cord, one of many tucked discreetly against wallpaper and panelling. Tug it, and somewhere a worker appears. That's the system. You wonder what would occur if you yanked one yourself, just once for amusement, to discover who'd respond. Likely nobody. Back in the passage, the cold resurfaces. Your limbs throb, but there remain grates to service and carpets to beat and marks to erase. You detect a whisper, 2 housegirls giggling quietly behind the stairwell, not slacking, just momentarily, a snatched happiness. You nearly grin, nearly, but a board squeaks overhead and the instant expires. A door swings wide, footsteps approaching. You withdraw down the corridor just as the ladies' house shoes emerge at the stairway top. Your work is complete here for now, but the washing room bell just sounded again. The washing room isn't a space, it's a punishment. Frozen tiles beneath, walls that perspire in winter, and a roof so compressed you occasionally feel it bearing down on your consciousness. It reeks of stiffener and moist fabric with a metallic tang from the never-ending procession of tin vessels, copper cookware, and iron grating waiting to be scrubbed, dried, buffed, and arranged once more. You stoop to the basin, a beaten trough supplied by a temperamental lever. Sometimes it releases water smoothly. Sometimes you must plead. This morning it expels a grudging stream, and you prepare for the pain in your forearms as you haul pail after pail from the cask outside. The lever complains in harmony with your spine. The cookware is weighty, but not as weighty as the hush. You can detect the head cook humming somewhere past the entrance, an out-of-tune melody that somehow maintains your balance. That, and the constant cadence of your own breathing. You've discovered how to locate rhythm in the monotony. The rasp of a brush against a pot, the whistle of vapour from rinsed fabric, the subtle rustle of apron against dress. The youngest kitchen helper rushes through, face crimson, apron askew. She's transporting a broken egg on a dish like it's crown jewels. She stammers that the cook demands another dozen immediately, and vanishes before you can respond. You wipe your palms on your skirt once more. Through the narrow washing room opening, if you can label it an opening, more like a blur of glass, you observe a section of slate sky and the peak of the coal shelter. Once, months prior, you spotted a feline there. You observed it for 5 full minutes before somebody shouted your name. You never spotted the feline after. Back at the basin, you're surprised by the metallic crash of a serving utensil plummeting into a vessel. It rebounds once, then rattles to the floor. You crouch slowly. You've performed this countless times, but today your knees protest loudly when you rise. You strike your skull on the cupboard rim, not forcefully, but enough to taste your respiration. You chuckle just once, a foolish noise, but there's nobody to detect it, and that's nearly soothing. Afterward, you transport the trays up the stairs, cautiously, gradually. The steps are slim and vertical. If you tumble, the tray will create more sound than you ever produced. You walk past portraits that don't recognize your name. Sometimes you consider how peculiar it is these wealthy families display their forebears on the wall like prizes, but nobody ever paints a worker, not a single one. The sitting room carries the scent of lavender and coal fumes. You place the tray on the sideboard with the silence of somebody who's rehearsed disappearing. Then you shift the teacups by a half-inch, not because anybody will register, but because somebody could. As you retreat, you overhear a visitor say, "Everything here operates like machinery." You almost snort. If you are machinery, you are one with a fractured component and no winding mechanism. You operate because there's no alternative. When you descend again, the cook informs you the stove is acting up again. You'll need to shovel the cinders, then retrieve more coal, then restart the rear oven. You nod, naturally. You were just thinking how peaceful the washing room had seemed. Before the morning concludes, your apron is ashen, your fingertips are shriveled from moisture, and your feet feel like stones bound with string. But the bell sounds again and again, and you respond. You always respond. You wouldn't imagine buffed timber could be so harsh, but by mid-morning it's your primary opponent. Gleaming railings, shiny baseboards, delicate tables with excessive carved supports, and seats that seem engineered purely to capture grime and embarrass your work. You transport a cloth and wax like armaments, though you realise you'll never triumph. The gleam must be flawless, but not excessive. The boundary between refined and tasteless is apparently paper-thin, and somehow you're blamed if violated. You start in the front corridor, the tall clock towers beside you, ticking with that satisfied beat that only ancient timepieces possess, the sort that reminds you it's existed longer than you and will probably persist long after you've departed. You clean its carved details slowly. The wax smells of vinegar and beeswax adhering to your palms even after you rinse them, as though trying to persuade you that you've accomplished something worthwhile. The railings come next, and you work from base to peak, always ascending, never descending. You've been informed it's unlucky to clean downward, as though dragging prosperity from the household. You don't trust that, not truly, but still your palms move upward. Once you inquired what species of wood it was. Mahogany, somebody stated. You had zero idea what that signified, but you gestured as though you did. You've since discovered it scratches readily and that any blemish is a personal affront to the woman of the household. You proceed slowly, inhaling shallowly, frightened of your own fastenings. Around the bend you detect the sharp whistle of another maid as she beats a carpet out the rear entrance. It's bright, somewhat off-pitch, and it makes you feel less isolated, but only somewhat. You step into the sitting room. Now the genuine performance starts. This chamber is a danger zone of decorations, porcelain canines, glass containers, miniature statues that look like they'd sob if bumped. You once knew a worker dismissed for breaking the wing off a china angel. You recall the noise, not the crack, but the quiet following, like existence caught its breath. The angel vanished. The following day, so did she. You clean each surface slowly. The fabric murmurs over the areas. You attempt not to inhale too forcefully, not to blink near the porcelain. The containers have designations. The timepiece has backstory. The small bronze stallion on the shelf supposedly survived a blaze in 1812, and if you so much as shift it an inch leftward, you'll hear complaints for weeks. You drop to your knees to dust beneath the sofa. There's perpetually lint here, perpetually hairpins and fibres and the sporadic penny that you're forbidden to pocket. Your knees object, and the floor provides no compassion. You attempt to be swift, but not hasty. There's a distinction. The trim on the carpet must be groomed. Yes, groomed. Each strand smoothed and aligned. One of the house visitors once commented on how orderly the trim appeared. The lady glowed. You smouldered with an odd pride that left zero trace. In the angle stands a writing table nobody's touched in weeks. You dust it regardless, cautious not to disturb the blotter or the ink pot, which is empty but still menacing. The atmosphere smells of rose essence and coal fumes, and beneath it entirely of perspiration. Yours. But that element is never recognised. That odour is meant to evaporate like you do, required but not welcomed. When the clock chimes 11, you peek at the pane. Beyond, a bird hops along the ledge. It stops, angles its head free. Within, you resume buffing. The stairway awaits. It perpetually does, curved and graceful, with a crimson runner worn just sufficient to murmur secrets beneath your feet. You pause a moment to regard it, not from wonder, but because you comprehend how much of your existence has been invested scrubbing those exact steps. One palm on a moist cloth, the other gripping a bristle brush like salvation. It's not merely about grime. Grime is the adversary, but so is duration. Every hour, fresh specks drift in from invisible angles. The stairway gathers them like medals, especially in the step corners. You kneel on the second step and commence back erect, vision lowered. You've mastered how to clean while partially listening for movement overhead. The lady has a tendency of descending without notice. By the time you arrive at the platform, your knuckles are tender. Not from labour precisely, but from holding back. You once scraped a blemish on the timber panel, just a hairline scratch. Nobody observed except the assistant butler. He informed you in that deliberate manner of his, certain timber recalls. You've never dismissed it. Up the stairs, the children's chamber entrance is cracked. You glance inside, not to trespass, but to verify. Nobody present. Just a scatter of playthings, a rocking mount that hasn't budged in days, and a weak smell of milk and lavender. You slip in and dust the window ledge. A miniature tin warrior lies face down. You position him standing from reflex. More than compassion. He's like you, coating chipped standing regardless. Back in the passage, the personal maid walks past you. She doesn't speak. She seldom does. Her hair is immaculate, her steps soundless, her face inscrutable. You envy her only occasionally. She attends the lady directly, which means superior wages, superior meals, but far more examination. One wrinkle in a gown, one displaced hairpin, and she's dismissed. You walk past a side surface with a blue container filled with peacock plumes. They appear grand until you realise they're perpetually dusty. Nobody understands why they're positioned there. The gentleman dislikes them, but the lady insists they enliven the angle, so you dust around them, cautious not to disturb a single feather. Now, it's moment for the brass entrance handles, keyholes, bell cords. All must gleam, but not excessively brightly. Nothing worse than tasteless shine. You transport a small container of wax and a cloth folded so many occasions it's gentle as silk. You kneel, buff, stand, advance like machinery. The gentleman's office is restricted unless summoned. But you've been beckoned before once to dust the account books. you weren't permitted to examine naturally, but your vision slipped just once and observed names, figures, obligations you never mentioned to anybody. You've barely acknowledged it to yourself. Noon is closing in. Somewhere in the kitchen, the cook shouts commands for lunch preparations, but you're still out here in the corridors, buffing away fingerprints that belong to someone else. You think about how strange that is, how much of your work involves erasing proof of other people's existence and your own. In the parlour, the fire you set this morning blazes warmly now, throwing amber light across the floorboards. Nobody will remember to thank you for it, but someone might stop for just a moment and breathe deeply at the comfort. That's sufficient. Eventually you move along to the guest room. A small smudge on the windowsill grabs your attention. Lipstick. You wipe it clean carefully, leaving nothing behind. The tale it tells isn't yours to understand. By the time the lunch bell sounds, your spine hurts, your knees complain, and your shoulders plead for mercy. But you're only at the midpoint of your day. You descend the stairs once more, carrying the smell of furniture polish and lavender, prepared to meet the madness of the kitchen. The wood shines behind you as though nobody had laid a finger on it. You push open the swinging door into the kitchen where everything transforms completely, dense with vapour, yelling, and the harsh smell of onions hitting sizzling grease. It strikes you like a physical barrier. The kitchen pulses with more energy than any other space in the house. But it's not welcoming. It's frenzied, sweltering, and reeks of everyone's anxiety. You sidestep the scullery girl hauling a pail of scraps and the footman buffing the silverware, both displaying the same look. Already behind schedule, already at fault. The cook occupies the centre like a commander in absolute control. She doesn't shout instructions, she hurls them. The squab is overcooked. Where's the Devon cream? Who laid hands on this aspic? You don't respond unless addressed directly, and even then only if you're certain you're not the target. The wisest approach is to stay quick and hold something constantly. An empty platter beats idle palms. Lunch preparations resemble a choreographed routine, and you're supposed to know the movements before you've heard the rhythm. The broth must be served without spillage. The bread must be properly crisp. Nobody wants a soggy centre or charred rim. You won't consume any of this, but you understand its requirements better than your own food. That's the genuine secret of servitude, committing the comforts of others to memory as though they're holy scripture. On the worktop rests a meat pie, so intricately latticed it resembles artwork. You know it required 3 hours and a series of profanities to construct, but when it's presented, the family will acknowledge it casually, as though the pie materialized from nowhere. That's your responsibility too, to make the extraordinary appear effortless. You're given a folded towel and instructed to ready the serving platters. The dishes are piled high, gleaming like plate armour. The silver utensils sparkle, polished yesterday, then polished again this morning. God forbid a single smudge remains. You lift the tray with both arms, gaze locked forward. One misstep and the next thing you'll be holding is your termination papers. Beyond the kitchen, the air cools once more. You travel like a phantom, tray steady, listening for approaching steps, calculating where to pause, where to pass by undetected. There's a ranking of invisibility here. Junior servants vanish most thoroughly. In the dining hall, the footman holds the door open with a gesture. The table is already arranged, a picture of perfect balance. Wine glasses capture the afternoon light like miniature chandeliers. The lady of the house has selected a centerpiece of roses and cascading greenery, though neither are currently blooming. You imagine the groundskeeper paid someone at the flower stall. You set the tray soundlessly on the serving table and retreat. This is the segment you despise most. Lingering, observing, existing without truly existing. The family arrives, voices subdued but unmistakably authoritative. They mention government affairs, or social updates, or a relative's betrothal. You remain like a monument, anticipating the signal. A look, a raised utensil, a wave of the fingers. These are your prompts. You advance, fill the goblets, withdraw. You're not to disturb, not even with breathing. The youngest boy knocks over his glass. It streams across the tablecloth in a silvery path. Nobody faults him. You step closer, absorb the liquid, disappear once more. As the dining continues, your knees stiffen, your spine tightens, your expression settles into courteous blankness. Once you attempted a smile, it caused the gentleman to scowl. The head butler offers an almost imperceptible signal. Moment to remove the opening course. You start over. Quick, exact, overlooked. You transport the used dishes back through the service entrance, back into the heat and turmoil of the kitchen, where everything is either simmering, charring, or shattering. The humidity wraps around you like mist. The cook snaps something about the gravy being too watery, but you've already pivoted toward the basin with your stack of plates, acting as though you didn't catch it. There's a careful tempo here. You can't halt the performance, but you discover which movements to approximate. Someone tips over a spice container. Another servant drops silverware with a crash that earns a fierce stare. Every error gets magnified. Every noise conveys disapproval. You clean plates rapidly, cautious not to damage the rim. The china is foreign, costly, and more valuable than your molars. Last season, a girl shattered a soup dish, and the tale pursued her through 3 households. You make yourself compact, capable, and perfect, not because anyone appreciates you, but because they don't require justification to criticize you. The following course needs preparation. You assist with dividing the roasted meat, organising the vegetables, positioning the mustard in its silver dish. The cook modifies a solitary herb sprig on a plate with the focus of someone readying for combat. You grasp everything here must appear spontaneous, which means it demands everything. Then you're back in the passage, holding the tray once more. Your limbs are starting to quiver, not from burden, though that's involved, but from sheer monotony. You walk past the china cupboard, its shelves brilliant like ivory, each item more precious than 4 weeks of your earnings. You've never risked handling them. You wonder who cleans them. Likely someone bolder or more frantic. Back in the dining hall, the second course has concluded, and with it, most discussion. The family reclines in their seats like nobility captured in portraiture. The head butler slices cheese with hushed exactness. You refill wine once more, and this time the gentleman actually notices you, just momentarily, just enough to communicate that you're being watched, not acknowledged, simply surveyed. Dessert arrives, baked fruit, and a layered pudding that consumed the entire morning to assemble. You don't sample a morsel. You never do. The absurdity is that you'll finish your day cleaning custard off plates you never touched, discarding berry pits into the waste. You bear sweetness on fine china and scrape bitterness from tin. When the meal finishes, they exit the room as nonchalantly as they arrived, their conversation fading down the hallway. You're left with fragments, marks, and a stillness that seems strangely noisier than the commotion that preceded it. You remove everything from the table, every gesture rehearsed. Raise, gather, wrap, smooth. The linen is stripped, shaken clean, returned later, and the table buffed so it forgets anything occurred. The sole evidence exists in your spine, your calves, and the sore on your finger that reopened during the third journey. In the kitchen again, the cook has started her quiet ritual of storing remnants, shouting less now. She appears exhausted too, more aged. You watch her dab her forehead with the edge of her apron before pivoting to judge the dessert arrangement. It's not aimed at you. It never is, but it always registers as though it is. Your lunch waits in the alcove, bread turned hard, tea turned tepid, and a fragment of something unclear that should have been consumed hours earlier. You don't object. You're fortunate to receive it at all. You settle on a short stool, spine against the bricks, chewing deliberately, not for flavour, but for duration, because the bell could sound again any second, and when it rings, you'll rise, you'll respond. Because that's your function. The hardest aspect of serving morning meals isn't the pre-dawn hour, it's the requirement of remaining motionless. But by late day, the cruelty transforms. You no longer stand quietly against the wall. Now, you become invisible through movement, expected to float through sitting rooms and offices with hands that operate flawlessly, eyes that never pause, and steps that know precisely where not to creak. It starts with the afternoon refreshment service, and the execution must be perfect. You carry the refreshment tray up the primary staircase, mindful to maintain it balanced. The silver pot is heavier than it appears, and the porcelain cups have belonged to the family for lifetimes. If you release one, it won't just be your hands that tremble, it'll be your standing. You don't need the warning. The previous maid who cracked a plate was accused of destroying the atmosphere of the chamber. She wept, then she disappeared. In the sitting room, the women are already positioned. The lady of the house relaxes near the glass, draped in a wrap and the power of complete comfort. One of her companions is laughing behind a covered hand, probably sharing some meaningless scandal that demands a pastry fork and calculated exclamations. A third woman nods as you step inside, her gaze momentarily scanning the tray as though examining you indirectly. You lower the tray onto the adjacent table. No speech, just an elegant dip of the legs, a rehearsed modification of the linens, the exact position of the pastry tower, everything properly placed. You've been instructed to arrange citrus wedges like timepiece numbers, 12 segments positioned precisely. It's slightly ridiculous, but you've discovered how to locate security in the ridiculousness. The lady of the house inclines her head faintly. You have permission. You proceed with caution. No rattle, no overflow. The motion must be controlled, refined, almost silent. The noise of liquid meeting porcelain is more inappropriate here than rumour. Your hand wavers for an instant, and the companion with the gloves registers it. You notice her mouth twitch. You sense the criticism settle somewhere profound in your chest. You present sugar implements only, never bare hands. The lady of the house selects one lump. Her companion demands 3 with a small chuckle as though challenging illness to locate her. You grin internally, only internally. As they drink and murmur, you retreat, returning to your invisible station beside the entrance. This is the waiting period, the holding yourself rigid period. You hear without hearing. Pieces float toward you. Something regarding a neighbouring family's girl and a shocking correspondence. Something regarding a garment noticed at the department store. Something regarding a lawn party that went absolutely awry because the staff delivered the finger sandwiches too chilled. You don't respond, you don't even flutter an eyelid. Across the space, a housemaid is modifying the draperies. She pulls too forcefully and the holder drops from its anchor. A sound, a hesitation, a glance. The lady of the house doesn't elevate her tone, she never does. But the atmosphere constricts. The maid loses colour, you experience it in your gut, that recognisable dropping sensation. You understand what she'll be managing later, correcting it, apologising for it, perhaps even compensating for it. The footman steps in with the dessert cart. 3 levels of biscuits, cookies and small cream puffs arranged like consumable construction. He appears as though he's transporting the royal treasures. You respect the steadiness in his stride, the emptiness in his expression. That requires instruction, that requires practice. He acknowledges you on his departure, the tiniest, quickest recognition between comrades. A gentle voice speaks your name, just one time. The lady of the house desires more heated water, and so you return to the kitchen. The kettle has already lost its warmth and the cook is absent. The scullery girl is submerged to her elbows in oily water, grumbling quietly about shattered plates and scorched hands. You don't request assistance. You understand better. You work swiftly. The kettle requires rinsing, refilling, and positioning on the range before anyone detects the postponement. The flame is still warm, but the water requires patience, as though ridiculing your haste. You shift slightly, on your heels, checking the timepiece. Every minute you're absent feels like an eternity upstairs. Once the water starts to whistle, you inspect the tray once more. A fresh cloth, an additional cup in case someone desires another. You shape a napkin into a blossom, not because it's demanded, but because the lady of the house once expressed faint pleasure at the sight, and that small flash of acceptance still resides somewhere in your being. You transport the kettle with both palms, moving carefully, hoping the temperature won't burn through the fabric before you arrive at the sitting room. When you enter, the discussion has changed. Now it's regarding verse, so touching. Someone exhales. Though you'd bet none of them has composed a stanza that wasn't in a greeting card, you refill the pot gently. The lady of the house doesn't glance upward, but her companion does. Her gaze rests on your palms. You've experienced that observation before. Not harsh, not gentle either. Inquisitive, evaluating, as though contemplating what it might resemble to occupy your position for a single morning. Then, rejecting it, you position the kettle on the holder and lower your head slightly before retreating. You'll remain close by, naturally, just beyond view, just within call. Prepared? Constantly. The housemaid who released the drapery holder earlier appears beside you in the corridor. She appears disturbed. You share a look. No language. There's nothing to express that won't worsen it. She's youthful. You wish she adapts rapidly. Refreshment extends longer than anyone requires. The sunlight moves through the glass, striking the crystal in a gentle shimmer. You consider how many afternoons have elapsed like this. How many years have dissolved into cups of refreshment and gentle grievances about climate and fabric. Sometimes it seems like you're caught in a circle, like the house is a creature that continues consuming the same day, repeatedly. Finally, the bell sounds once more. Refreshment is complete. You return to gather the cups. They're all partially full, makeup smeared on too. A piece of sponge has been pierced once and left behind. The silver implements are adhesive. You collect everything with hushed exactness, modifying your stability as you pivot to depart. Back in the kitchen, you discard the uneaten portions into the container. One of the cream puffs is nearly intact. You regard it, then recall the regulation. Nothing from the sitting room. It's not documented, but it's implemented, so you allow it to descend with a gentle thud into the bin. Waste is portion of the ceremony. You cleanse each dish with familiar tempo. The heated water calms your digits, but not your backbone. That discomfort is perpetual now, established deep, like an occupant that doesn't contribute rent. The scullery girl vocalizes again, this time somewhat louder. It's a children's melody, one you haven't recognized since you were tiny. You vocalize the secondary part under your breath without intention. The day isn't concluded, not even remotely. Upstairs. They'll dress for evening meal soon, which means pressing tools must be warmed, neck pieces stiffened, and house shoes positioned by the fireplace. And somewhere another kettle anticipates. But for one passing instant, you stand in the kitchen solitary, grasping a moist cloth and a recollection of sweetness that wasn't yours. And then the bell sounds. There's a particular variety of punishment designated for washing day. It commences with vapour and concludes with discomfort. Shoulders compressed, knuckles crimson, spine rigid as a bodice cord. But the most difficult aspect is recognising it begins all over again the next day. Because in a residence like this, washing is not a once-weekly occurrence. It's a perpetual surge, flowing through the laundry chamber in cycles of fabric, delicate trim and unvoiced anticipations. You enter the washing room just after refreshment has been removed, already moistened from the condensation that adheres to the stone surfaces. A row of containers waits, each one more filled than the previous. Sleeping linens, table coverings, toweling, undergarments, slips piled tall like evidence of your own insignificance. A wrinkled serviette in the incorrect stack can destroy everything. Ask the girl who combined lace with wool and discovered herself released before evening meal. The atmosphere is heavy with alkali and vapour. You elevate your sleeves, but it's a pointless action. Nothing remains dry here. You submerge your hands into the initial basin, a murky blend of heated water and soap fragments, and sense the sting instantly. Not sufficient to damage, just sufficient to remind you that suffering is portion of the schedule. You scrub, that's all. No discussion, no melody. Just scrub. The washing surface attacks your knuckles repeatedly. The grooves are merciless. A solitary sheet requires 20 minutes, more if it's marked, and every mark has a narrative. Makeup on a neck piece, writing fluid on a sleeve, crimson on a cloth, though nobody ever inquires about that. You squeeze out each item with your entire frame, rotating the water out like you're penalising it. Your limbs quake, the floor is slippery, the scent of heated fabric is omnipresent. Sudsy origin, piercing. Beyond, precipitation starts to descend. You detect it before you observe it, tapping the elevated panes in consistent tempo. You look toward the drying cables and exhale. Nothing will dry this day. The sheets will have to be suspended in the upper chamber, where the atmosphere barely circulates and decay waits like a malediction. You'll rest beneath one this night, the dampness wrapping around your extremities like a benign spectre. The pressing machine occupies the corner, your subsequent adversary. Metal wheels, timber rollers, a handle that retaliates if you're reckless. You insert a towel, rotate the lever, detect the compression, observe the water discharge in narrow, bitter rivulets. Repeatedly, repeatedly. Your shoulders ignite, but you don't cease. Ceasing is indulgence. The junior housemaid arrives quietly with another container. She doesn't communicate, just positions it down and withdraws. You wish she hadn't. The vision of fresh washing when you're still midway through the initial batch seems like a punishment too. In the corner, someone has sketched a small figure in white powder on the surface. A woman with a tiara, grinning, likely a jest. The monarch of suds. You grin despite yourself, then cough. The vapour always locates your airways. Eventually, at the distant portion of the room, the pressing tools start to warm. On the range. Their grips are covered in fabric to prevent burning digits, but the temperature penetrates anyway. You'll address that subsequently. First the drying, then the pressing, then the arranging, then the transporting. Always the transporting. You look down at your digits, creased, reddened, marked with soap. You flex them once. They protest like aged hinges, and then you extend for the subsequent item. You haul the container up the narrow upper chamber stairs, your limbs trembling from the burden of fabric, still moistened and substantial with the persistent smell of soap and mineral smoke. The steps are irregular, smoothed by a century of servant steps, each one invisible in the records of the house, but familiar to the planks beneath them. At the summit, the atmosphere alters. Not improved, just altered. Sparse, lifeless, dense with moisture, the upper chamber is the one location the family never visits. To them, it doesn't exist, but for you, it's the drying area, the pressing station, the location where washing suspends like capitulation banners. From every beam and peg, you thread the moistened sheets over cables suspended between rafters. Your palms are abraded. Each compression of the cloth leaves behind a slight burn, like you're squeezing out portions of yourself. Some fabrics are so delicate they could rupture with a harsh pull. Others are substantial, dense damask with embroidered initials that aren't yours. None of them belong to you, yet you recognise them better than their possessors. Beside you, another girl labours in silence. Her eyes are crimson, whether from vapour or weeping. You don't inquire, nobody inquires. The upper chamber is a location of quiet, not tranquility precisely, just exhaustion, too profound for language. Once the cables are complete, you pivot toward the pressing station. The range here is aged and unpredictable. It requires 2 servants just to keep it burning, 3 more to stop it from going under. Setting the drapes ablaze, you test the iron's temperature by spitting on its surface. Just a drop. just enough to catch the hiss. Too cool and it leaves wrinkles behind. Too hot and it burns the fabric. There are no second tries. You press each sheet as though you're pressing order into the day itself. Long sweeps, clean lines, no creases, no puckers. The iron weighs heavy and every stroke makes your shoulders ache. Someone once told you ironing was peaceful. You'd love to lock them in here for 60 minutes and see if they still believe it. A length of ribbon drops to the ground. You can't tell where it came from. Perhaps attached to an underskirt, perhaps a scrap from some long-forgotten trim. It's blue, the shade of sky on washing that refuses to dry. You tuck it into your apron pocket without considering it, not for keeping, just for moving to prevent it being crushed underfoot. Even that seems like mercy. When the last piece gets folded, your back feels fragile. You perch on a stool for just a moment, letting the iron lose its heat. Next to you, the metal gives off faint warmth, no longer hot enough to press, but still enough to burn. The attic window sits too high to reveal much, just a patch of grey. You stare at it regardless, attempting to recall the sensation of wind against your skin, the scent of rain before it becomes puddles. In the courtyard, some evenings a pigeon settles on the ledge. You call them all Henry. You're not sure why. The bell chimes faintly from below. You collect your basket. Down the steps once more, through the hallway, the identical path, the identical panes, the identical folded linens that must be arranged precisely in the linen cupboard, with lavender tucked between each layer so the mistress can murmur about how fresh everything is. And when it's finished, nobody speaks. Nobody ever does. There are spaces in the house unlisted on any floor plan. Nooks behind cabinets, narrow gaps beneath staircases, darkened recesses in the servants' hall. These are the silent pockets where the house exhales without observation, where secrets get stored like folded washing, and where maids master the real skill of disappearing. You've taken one of these nooks. It's hardly more than a wedge between a supply closet and an abandoned dumbwaiter shaft, but it belongs to you, just wide enough to crouch, just deep enough to vanish. Nobody notices you here unless they're searching, truly searching, and nobody ever is. This is where the housemaids retreat when they're moments from shattering, when somebody complained about lint on a pillow, or when a visitor has confused them for someone nameless and scolded them accordingly. It's where a girl might retreat to weep, or to adjust the strings on a borrowed corset, or to draft a letter she might never mail. And on particular days it's where whispered schemes get formed. You've overheard things here. Plans for departure, wishes of wedding the grocer's son, fantasies of a position in one of the modern hotels where uniforms are starched and hours are rumoured to be better. You doubt it, but you pay attention. Paying attention is part of the pattern. You nod when somebody says just one more year, though you recognise that's the identical thing she said 12 months ago. Today it's silent. You sit by yourself for 60 stolen moments, your head pressed against the cool plaster, the scent of starch and beeswax still attached to your sleeves. You loosen your cap just barely, just to let your scalp rest. Then footfalls. You're standing in a heartbeat, cap fixed, breath held. The housemaid drifts past without noticing you. Her hair is flawless, her eyes are glazed. She's mastered not blinking too frequently. The bell chimes. You track the sound. In the hallway near the nursery, the governess stands with arms crossed. She's not unkind, just worn thin by her position, forever trapped between family and staff. She informs you the youngest child has soiled her petticoat once more. You'll need to gather it, wash it, and deliver a clean one. You comply. The nursery's chaos as always. Toys scattered like a disaster still unfolding. A dollhouse bigger than your first bedroom stands against the wall and on the carpet. The child, wide-eyed, sharp-voiced, observes you with that unsettling stillness children sometimes possess when they understand exactly how much authority they command. She informs you her sleeves are scratchy and that you should repair them immediately. Please. You kneel next to her, fixing the ribbon, straightening the lace. She smells of milk and berries and something else, powder, perfume, something too mature for her. She asks why your hands are so coarse. You tell her it's from washing, though you want to say, because I labour, child, because I scrub the stories from other people's bedding. She nods, content with the explanation, then looks away. You rise, collect the dirty petticoat and fold it carefully. It's silk, too delicate for a 6-year-old, but the mistress demands it on the way out. The child calls behind you, I want the pink one next time, the one with the ribbons. And you say, yes, miss, though the pink one hasn't been repaired yet and the ribbons were ripped off last week. You transport the soiled petticoat down to the linen room, folded carefully as if it were royalty. It's absurd, truly, how something so tiny can be handled with such importance. But you've discovered in a house like this the significance of a thing isn't calculated in weight. It's calculated in who it touches, who dressed in it, and how loudly they might object. The linen room is silent, shadowy, and always faintly heated, walls covered with shelves, each piled high with folded precision, sheets, towels, slips, chemises, napkins, handkerchiefs, all arranged in layers with sprigs of lavender and a kind of devotion that verges on ridiculous. This is where perfection gets maintained, where even the folds have structure. You set the petticoat aside. It will require soaking before it can be washed, but that will come later. First, you must retrieve the pink one. You locate it on the mending table exactly where you positioned it. The fabric is gathered where the ribbons were torn, most likely during a tantrum nobody dared stop. You trace your fingers along the seams, sensing the damage and calculating the time it will require to repair. There isn't time, there never is, but you'll create it regardless. You thread the needle without considering, your fingers working in that automatic way they've mastered over years of mending holes nobody admits to creating stitch by stitch. You sew the ribbon back on, firmer this time, knowing it'll be pulled again before the week ends. You hum as you labour, nothing specific, just a few notes of something that resembles comfort. The underhousemaid enters in the doorway, holding a lace-trimmed towel with a stain she can't eliminate. She appears barely older than 16, and you can detect the terror in her expression. You wave her in. She sits folding herself compact on the bench next to you. You take the towel from her grasp and inspect it. It's lipstick. You don't inquire whose. Instead, you prepare a mixture of salt and lemon juice from the bottle hidden under the sink. You work it into the fabric, carefully, observing the red blur into pink and then gradually vanish. She releases her breath like she's been holding it all morning. You don't mention that sometimes the stain returns when it dries. You just smile. She assists you complete the petticoat, securing the final thread with fingers that shake. When it's finished, you fold it in tissue paper, place it into a basket and pass it to her. Be swift, you say, but not frantic. She nods and hurries off, and you sit in the silence for a moment longer. The sun is dropping now, spilling gold through the high windows. It paints the linen shelves in gentle strips, bands. You think of the girl's fingers, how they trembled. You recall when yours did too. They still do occasionally, but you've mastered hiding it. The bell chimes once more. You return to the nursery for the discarded ribbon. As you step in, the child glances up at you with pretend seriousness and says, "You took forever." You smile with just your eyes and say it had to be flawless, and when she looks away, already uninterested, you bend to collect the old ribbon she's thrown on the floor like it means nothing. You fold it carefully into your apron pocket. It may not be much, but down in your cupboard nook it'll appear like something lovely. He never elevates his voice. That's what makes it harder. The butler moves through the house like an ancient ghost with shined shoes, silent, all-observing and permanently controlled. His voice rarely climbs above a whisper, but it cuts through a room more efficiently than any yell. You never understand what he's considering, only what he's determined, and you discover not in words, but in assignments. This morning he's positioned by the silver cabinet, examining the cutlery one piece at a time. He signals you with a look. Not a word, just a tilt of the head, a movement of the eye, as though speech is beneath the dignity of his station. You rush forward. He opens a drawer, raises a soup ladle, and displays you a smudge you can't even detect. He says nothing, just lifts one eyebrow. You nod. He passes it to you, dismissed. Downstairs, you polish that ladle for the 4th time this week. Each circle of the cloth reflects your own face, unclear, exhausted, and slightly distorted. You work the silver until it shines unnaturally, understanding full well he'll examine it once more, regardless. The butler manages more than the dining room. He is the master of atmosphere. He controls the flow of the household like a conductor, guaranteeing that nothing disrupts, nothing stalls, nothing offends the delicate rhythm of upper-class expectation. It is reported he once managed to discipline an entire staff over a poorly arranged decanter without raising a single word, just a pause, a glance, and a shuffled footstep too loud in the pantry. By the close of the day, the maid responsible had been reduced to silent tears, and she hadn't even touched the decanter. He wears gloves, even when he doesn't require them, and his pocket watch ticks every half hour with frightening precision. You've heard the underfootman claim he times afternoon tea down to the second, once dismissing a girl for ringing the bell at 4:32 instead of 4:30. His office smells of ink and starch. Not quite a study, not quite a storage room. Somewhere between he keeps ledgers there, recording every delivery, every guest, every misstep, every he never writes in a rush. You've observed him record the late arrival of a crate of lemons with the same gravity as a burial. Despite his strict nature, there's a strange peace around him. He creates structure where chaos threatens and in a world of constant movement. There's something oddly comforting about the way he stands motionless. Still, he frightens everyone. Even the mistress defers to him in minor matters, depending on his memory, his discretion, his understanding of how things ought to appear. He knows which guests prefer anchovy paste and which detest it. He knows how much claret is served before Sir Wallace starts reciting poetry. He remembers the date of Lady Eliza's accident with the bouillon spoon, though he's never once referenced it aloud. He doesn't smile, not truly. Once you witnessed a hint of amusement flicker at the edge of his mouth when a pigeon wandered into the entryway. He stepped forward, arms behind his back, and guided it out with a sharp nod, as if removing an impolite guest. When he isn't present, you find yourself checking toward doors and mirrors, half expecting him to materialize. The worst errors are made when you forget he might be observing, and when he speaks your name just once in that low, measured voice, it means something is about to shift. You've mastered reading his silences when the butler stands at the pantry door with one hand behind his back. It means someone has forgotten to refill the brandy. When he pauses mid-step on the way to the dining room, it means the rug isn't positioned properly with the table legs. And when he closes the ledger, very slowly, deliberately, without a word, it means someone's name is about to vanish. You don't want it to be yours. This afternoon he calls you by name. Just once, calm even. You stop what you're completing, polishing a bell jar, and follow him to the service hallway, where light never quite reaches and voices never echo. There was an incident, he says. A misplaced dinner knife. Not you, naturally. But I trust you'll verify the sideboard this evening. You nod. That's all you're permitted to do. But inside your stomach drops. It wasn't your error, but now it's your duty. That's how it functions. His trust is a double-edged thing, an honour you must constantly earn. In the following hours, you observe him move through the house with effortless command. The family barely registers, yet everything bends around him. He's like the gravitational force that keeps the whole household from spinning off into disorder. He supervises the afternoon preparations for dinner, standing by the butler's pantry, his hands clasped behind him. The silver trays are arranged, the wine list reviewed, the glasses examined in the light. He doesn't touch anything, but somehow nothing is complete until he nods. When the footmen line up before service, he inspects them like soldiers before parade. Cuffs are fixed, hair smoothed, heels positioned. One footman has a smudge on his glove. The butler merely glances. The smudge disappears within seconds. Sometimes you wonder how he became this way. Rumour claims he once worked for a viscount's household and before that served tea at a gentleman's club where he mastered the art of refined silence. Others claim he was trained by a French maitre d' during a season abroad. Nobody knows the truth. Nobody dares inquire. You once witnessed him standing in the vestibule long after the family had retired, observing the gaslights flicker against the brass railings. For a brief moment he appeared tired, human, but when you stepped into sight his back straightened. He nodded once and disappeared into the shadows, as if the moment had never occurred. He keeps everything operating: meals, moods, reputations. He guarantees the maitre d' is respected at formal dinners. He corrects the housekeeper in whispers. He reminds the gardener which flowers bloom in May, and when a guest behaves poorly, it's the butler who guarantees they're never invited again without ever appearing to interfere. Still, nobody thanks. Him? Not truly. He isn't here to be appreciated. He's here to protect the house from itself. Late in the evening, you pass him in the corridor. He says nothing, but offers the smallest nod, a gesture so uncommon it catches your breath. It's not affection, not approval, it's recognition. And, in a world where most people look through you, that's something worth holding. The air has shifted. It's late afternoon, but upstairs the house is buzzing once more. Guests are arriving for dinner. Voices drift down the staircase like perfume, and the sound of carriage wheels echoes through the drive. But you, meanwhile, are elbow-deep in soap and chamber pots. This part of the day is rarely mentioned in polite conversation. The glamorous upstairs world prefers to pretend it doesn't occur, that beds remain magically spotless, that wash basins empty themselves, that people don't leave behind little traces of digestion and embarrassment. But you know differently. You begin in the guest rooms, bucket in one hand, cloth in the other. You've mastered breathing through your mouth. The first pot is still heated, which you don't consider too long. You move with speed, but not haste. Haste leads to spills, and spills mean repercussions. Each pot is emptied, cleaned, rinsed with vinegar, dried and replaced to its discreet home. Beneath the nightstand you place the lids on carefully, as if tucking them in. In the dressing rooms you wash out the basins. Bits of hair cling to the porcelain, a smear of rouge, a drop of shaving soap, the faint trace of last night's brandy. You eliminate it all. Each cloth wrung out carries someone else's residue. You get accustomed to it, or you don't, and you just pretend. Sometimes you discover things. A gold hairpin behind the washstand, a note folded tight and tucked into the fire grate. Once a crumpled handkerchief with a stitched monogram you didn't recognise and a dark stain that didn't lift. You never reference these. You just complete your work as if the objects mean nothing, as if you weren't the final witness to all their concealed lives. Down the hall, a bell rings. Not for you, this one's for the footman, but the sound makes your hands move quicker regardless. Pavlov would have had a celebration in a Victorian household. Next comes the hearths. You sweep out the ashes, careful not to leave even a speck behind. Ash is peculiar. No matter how much you remove, more seems to manifest. It gets in your cuffs, behind your ears, under your nails. It's a part of you now. The guest bedroom at the end of the corridor smells of lemon oil and disappointment. The carpet is new, expensive, hand-tufted, and the mistress has warned everyone twice that no soot shall ever touch it. You crawl on hands and knees with the ashpan, heart racing with every movement. A single flake out of place could mean blame, possibly termination. You complete your work slow and precise. Just as you're finishing, the door creaks open. A guest returned early. She pauses in the doorway, surprised. You freeze. She steps over you, not unkindly, but as if stepping over a misplaced suitcase. "Oh," she says, "I didn't realize you were still here." You rise quickly, eyes down. "Yes, miss." She moves past you and sits at the vanity, adjusting her necklace. In the mirror, you catch a glimpse of yourself in the reflection. You look tired, smudged, small. She doesn't register. You leave without sound, your bucket swinging gently against your knee, and in the next room another pot waits. The last chamber pot of the evening is always the hardest, not because it's filthier, though it often is, but because by the time you reach it, your spine feels fractured and your hands are raw from scrubbing porcelain and hauling heavy water. Water and still. Nobody upstairs seems to register or care. They're dressing for dinner now, gowns and gloves, studs and satin, while you kneel next to the underbelly of civilization, scraping it spotless before the candles are even lit. You toss the last bucket with a heavy splash, the contents disappearing into the outdoor drain behind the scullery. The smell clings to your apron, to your sleeves, even to your hair. You try not to consider it. You always try not to think. Back inside, the house begins to transform once more. The afternoon hush has broken into an evening murmur. Laughter upstairs, music tuning, a cork popping somewhere near the drawing room. The shift from silent filth to polished showmanship is jarring, like observing a rotting orchard painted over in gold leaf. You head toward the back stairs, arms aching when you hear it. A bell. You recognize the sound by now. Soft, quick, demanding. Not one of the usual summonses. This is the bell for the back parlour, and that means difficulty. That bell only rings when something's been discovered that shouldn't have been left behind. You quicken your pace, passing a footman adjusting his cuffs in the hall mirror. He doesn't glance at you, that's the rule. You're visible only when you've completed something wrong. In the back parlour, the butler waits. He doesn't speak at first, just points. There on the carpet is a trail, small, dark flecks. Coal dust, perhaps, or boot polish. It snakes across the pale threads of the rug in silent defiance. "You laid this fire, I believe," he says softly. You nod. Naturally you did. He doesn't elevate his voice. He doesn't need to. "I'll expect it corrected," he says. Before dinner is served, you kneel once more, pulling the soft brush from your apron pocket. You work the bristles into the carpet fibres carefully, attempting not to fray the weave. Each motion is exact, each flick a reminder that your presence here must be completely eliminated. It requires longer than it should. The dust is stubborn. It always is when someone's observing. When you finish, the butler gives a single nod and steps aside. No thanks, no words of relief. Just acknowledgement that the world has been restored. You step into the corridor, exhaling. Behind you, the room is flawless once more, or close enough. By now the bells are ringing like a symphony. One from the dressing room, another from the hallway by the library, requests for slippers, for perfume, for clean gloves. Dinner approaches, and with it the illusion of effortless living. You pass the housekeeper in the corridor. She gives you a glance, then passes you a folded cloth. "Dust on the umbrella stand," she says, then adds, almost kindly, "You've had a long day." You offer a faint smile, though your arms feel as though they no longer belong to you. You carry the cloth like it's made of iron. As you bend to wipe the stand, your knees crack, the identical sound every day, a protest your body has stopped making. Aloud. In the glass door next to you, you catch your reflection once more, curled over silent face half shadowed in the twilight glow. And then you rise, cloth folded neatly, and disappear into the hallway once more. Because even after scrubbing the most private, most concealed corners of the house, you still aren't permitted to leave a mark. The bells don't just ring, they communicate. Each one has its own tone, its own rhythm, its own command. By now you recognise them by heart. The drawing room bell rings twice, sharp and expectant. The master's study bell rings once, low and slow, like a warning. And the guest bell in the far corridor always sounds slightly off, like it's sneering at you. You carry their messages in your body, now. When one rings, your spine straightens before your mind processes, your steps quicken, your face rearranges itself into something blank and apologetic. You respond as if your life depends on it, because sometimes it does. The master has a reputation, not violent, not nothing so crude, but his words can strip skin from bone, and he delivers them in a tone so even you sense the humiliation twice. Once in the moment, and again when you're alone today, his bell rings mid-prep, just as dinner is about to be served. That alone is unusual. He rarely interrupts the performance. You wipe your hands and go. He's in the study naturally. A fire smoulders in the grate. The room smells of pipe tobacco and varnish. He doesn't glance up when you enter, just gestures vaguely toward the sideboard. You detect the problem instantly. A glass has left a ring on the polished wood. It's barely visible, faint, the size of a coin. But to him it's a mark of failure, a symptom of deeper rot, a servant slipping, a system faltering. He doesn't speak at first, just observes as you approach with a cloth dampened just right, wiping the ring away with the gentlest touch. Then, almost casually, he says, "I assume you recognise how disappointing this is?" You nod, because naturally you do. It doesn't matter that you didn't place the glass there. It never matters who did. It suggests a certain carelessness. He continues, "We can't afford that." You resist the urge to glance at the door. You let the words settle like dust, absorbing them. Without expression, he dismisses you. With a flick of the hand, you leave your shoulders tighter than when you entered. As you walk back toward the kitchen, the guest room bell rings. You respond to it without hesitation. A gentleman has dropped his glove and can't be troubled to retrieve it. You collect it from the floor and pass it back to him. He doesn't thank you. He doesn't meet your eyes. You're dismissed once more. Back in the servants' corridor, you cross paths with the underfootman. He's just returned from laying out cigars in the smoking room. He gives you a look, half tired, half amused. "We should start wearing bells ourselves," he mutters. You smile. It's the only one you'll receive today. Dinner service begins shortly after. You won't be serving directly. You're too low in rank for that tonight. But you'll be in the wings, passing trays, polishing glasses, running messages, adjusting curtains when the flame flickers too much. Always moving, always one step behind the noise. Each bell tonight will pull you in a new direction. One for more wine, one for a fresh napkin, one because someone can't locate their spectacles, though they're tucked right into their waistcoat. You respond to all of them because in this house the bells don't just request things, they remind you who you are. You return to the kitchen during a lull. Though lull is relative here, it just means the shouting has quieted slightly, and the air isn't thick with flying grease or scalding water. The cook is pacing, muttering about soufflés and salmon. A tray of oysters sits on the counter, untouched, half melted over crushed ice. Nobody seems to care. That's the way it is. Perfection must be prepared, whether or not it's appreciated. The bell rings once more. You check the panel. It's the bell from the second-floor sitting room, the mistress's private retreat. You straighten your apron, smooth your sleeves, and go. She's seated by the hearth when you arrive, a novel resting on her lap, a silk shawl gathered around her shoulders. The fire crackles politely. She doesn't glance at you right away. When she does, her eyes drift to a table near the window. "The curtains," she says softly. "The two open, the sun is catching my mirror." You nod and adjust them. It requires less than 10 seconds. When you turn back, she's returned to her book. Leave the door slightly ajar, she adds, just as you're about to exit. I dislike feeling closed in. You obey, then step back into the corridor. The footman is just ahead, balancing a silver platter of Petits fours. He gives you a look not mocking, just resigned. You've both been summoned for smaller things, but small things accumulate. The third-floor guest bell chimes not long after you climb the stairs quickly, legs protesting each step. It's one of the visiting cousins, a woman with a voice like chimes and a temper like vinegar. She's managed to misplace her brooch, an heirloom, she insists, and is convinced it must have fallen between the cushions of the sitting chair. You kneel, dig your hands into the upholstery, and search. She observes. Every movement feels theatrical, like she's testing how much grovelling can be completed before you break. Eventually you locate the brooch, under the rug. She doesn't thank you. She says you really must be more thorough when cleaning. You swallow the reply. As you step out of the room, another chime sounds. This time it's announcing that dinner service has started in the dining area. Though you won't be serving at the table tonight, you're positioned right outside those heavy doors. You wait in the shadows, topping off the wine pitcher, grabbing the backup gravy dish, passing the footman a clean napkin. When someone at the table laughs, the sound drifts through to where you stand. Silverware catches the lamplight in brief flashes. You catch glimpses of the scene only in fragments, but it's more than enough to make you feel like a ghost watching your own existence. The dinner guests sit in their ease, their dishes replenished before they can ask, their wine glasses perpetually filled. To them it all unfolds as though by some invisible magic. You understand the secret. As the evening progresses, you're dispatched to the parlour to tend the fire before the women move there after dinner. The coals have mostly burned down to ash. You add fresh fuel, encouraging the flames back to life. While doing this, you see the poker has been left at an angle. You straighten it out. It's the sort of thing nobody might ever see, but if someone does, it suddenly matters tremendously. Later on, once the cheese has been served, you assist with clearing the dining area. The guests stand up from their seats. You keep your eyes lowered. The lady of the house praises the soufflé, the gentleman critiques the wine selection. You gather the dishes, swiftly, soundlessly, as though you'd never been present at all. In the kitchen, the dirty dishes are stacked impossibly high already. You wrap a clean towel around your waist. The girl working the wash basin lets out a tired groan as she plunges her arms into the water. You both understand the chimes aren't done for the night. They'll sound again when somebody wants their house shoes brought up, or when the mistress suddenly remembers she's missing her wrap, or when a lamp starts to flicker and someone insists on having a fresh one delivered immediately, or just because someone wants to test whether you'll still respond when summoned, and the answer is always yes, because that's what those bells demand of you. They're observing you now, not the master of the house, not the mistress, not even the head butler at this moment. The young ones. You attempt to hide it, but their gazes track your every action, large, inquisitive, and unnervingly perceptive. Young ones notice things grown folks don't, or at least they don't bother pretending otherwise. You're in the schoolroom at this moment, called up to collect the lunch dishes and straighten up the morning's chaos. There's a partially eaten apple sitting on the counter, a line of cookie crumbs along the window ledge, and a toy horse that's lost its tail. The teacher has stepped away briefly, which leaves you by yourself with them. The older boy sits with his legs crossed in the window alcove, acting like he's reading a book. But he's observing you from behind those pages, eyes flickering above the text. The younger girl in her pristine pinafore and shiny shoes stares directly at you, her head tilted sideways like an interested sparrow. "What did you say your name was?" she asks out of nowhere. You answer with a respectful tone, using your most polite manner. "That's an odd name," she comments. The boy lowers his book a bit. Is it true you sleep in the attic? You hesitate for just a fraction of time, then give a nod. Yes, young sir. He smiles. Must get pretty cold up there. It does at times. The girl's expression changes to concern. How come you don't have a dog? You blink in surprise. We're not permitted to have animals. She looks absolutely stunned, as if you've just told her you were raised in a cave. Not even a small cat? No, miss. She leans closer and says quietly, I couldn't survive without a kitten. You offer a gentle smile, but remain silent. The teacher comes back then, hurried and out of breath. In that instant the moment breaks apart. The children sit up straight like tiny soldiers. You collect the tray and move toward the exit. But just before you leave, the boy speaks up. Do you ever feel lonely? The teacher shushes him quickly. Feeling awkward, you answer softly over your shoulder, not when there's work to do. He gives a serious nod, as though he grasps something adults will never comprehend. Back downstairs, the household noise surrounds you like a heavy, wet garment. Someone's banging cookware in the kitchen. A chime rings from one of the bedrooms. The housemaid in the corridor rushes past you, her cheeks flushed with worry. You can hear the cook yelling and the butler's raspy cough and the crash of something glass that someone's going to catch blame for, but the children's words stay with you. Their interest lingers in your mind. You've made their beds, you've laundered their clothing, you've mended their toys and tucked their covers more often than their own mother and father ever have. You understand their anxieties. The boy gets scared when there's thunder, though he'd never confess it. The girl mumbles in her sleep about kittens and candy and being abandoned. You've witnessed them at their most genuine, and they've witnessed you. Not as someone on their level, that could never be, but as an actual person, if only for a moment. Later, while you're cleaning a mud-stained hem near the main stairway, the girl walks past with her teacher once more. She doesn't pause, doesn't say anything, but as she goes by, she slides a tiny piece of paper into your apron pocket without breaking her stride. You hold off until they've disappeared to unfold it. It's a picture, a stick person holding a broom, grinning next to what could be a cat, and below it, in childish handwriting, not everyone is invisible. You fold it back up carefully and tuck it into your pocket again, and for a brief time the bells sound more distant. The hours continue, but you keep that small folded picture in your apron pocket like a lucky token. It doesn't shield you, naturally, not from the actual hardships. The hot water still burns, the black dust still leaves marks. The cutting tone from the lady of the house still stings when a bough is tied crookedly or a pillow sits 2 inches out of position. But it calms something inside your chest, a small warmth that doesn't rinse away with water or heat. As twilight shadows lengthen down the hallway, the children are taken up to bed. You assist with readying the nursery. Clean linens, plumped-up pillows, the light blue coverlet for the girl, the patterned blanket for the boy. The nursery fireplace is built lower than the ones in the formal rooms, but it still provides steady warmth. You feed it a couple extra lumps of coal you shouldn't waste, but they'll sleep more comfortably tonight for it. You arrange the slippers at the end of each small bed. The teacher gives you a nod of appreciation, a recognition as uncommon as precious gems. She appears worn out. You can't hold it against her. She exists halfway between 2 different worlds and neither fully accepts her. You recognize that sensation intimately. Back in the servants' common area, someone has begun humming a church song. Not at full volume, just loud enough to fill the empty spaces in the atmosphere. The maid next to you is fixing a hole in a sock. The washgirl snores softly, head drooped on the table, arms crossed like a youngster who's mastered sleeping in borrowed moments. Nobody disturbs her, not just yet. You take out the drawing from your pocket one more time. The figure is crooked, the grin lopsided, the limbs uneven. But you examine it like it's a masterpiece from a famous museum. It's the first occasion in many months that anyone has sketched you, regardless of how roughly. You're accustomed to paintings of masters and ladies hung in golden frames with marble floors beneath. You've wiped dust from their faces countless times, never leaving a streak. But this picture, the broom, the cat, the small initials in the lower corner, belongs to you. You hide it behind the baseboard, in your tiny room upstairs, a secret decoration in a place where decorating isn't allowed. Next to it, the blue ribbon from the undergarment, a flattened flower you discovered behind the drapes last springtime. These are your prized possessions. Below, a chime sounds once more. You respond immediately, as you always do, but this evening something in your movement is altered, not more buoyant. Being light isn't something you're granted, but more solid, as though your steps remember something your thoughts haven't caught up with yet. The chime is for the parlour. Someone wants additional brandy. You arrange the serving tray, precisely cut crystal, decanter, polished drinking glass, cloth folded tidily beneath the stopper. You inspect it 2 times and then a third as you transport it along the corridor. Conversation floats through the door. Someone's laughing obnoxiously, far too loud. Some joke, undoubtedly at another person's cost. You tap gently, step inside and set the tray down with rehearsed smoothness. Nobody glances in your direction, they never do, but as you pivot to exit, the mother of the children looks your way, and for a split moment there's something visible in her expression, a brief flash of awareness, weak, pushed aside, almost right away. Still, it existed. And in this household, even a flash can signify everything. You've been called to the private study, not the library with books and tobacco, the actual study, the master's inner sanctum, a space so restricted that servants only step inside by special request or error, and the second option seldom goes well. You stop outside the thick oak door. The corridor is shadowy, the lamps turned way down to match the master's taste for focus. Your hands are spotless, your apron is freshly tied. You've double-checked your hair in the hallway looking glass. Even so, your fingers shake slightly as you rap on the door. Come in. His tone is measured, consistently measured. That's what makes it threatening. You ease the door open gradually. The space is hushed. No melody playing, no fire popping. Just the soft ticking of the timepiece on the shelf and the whisper of documents in his grasp. He doesn't raise his eyes. You look around while you stand there. The desk is remarkably organised, not a single item misplaced. On the left side, a line of account books bound in tan leather, each marked with gilt lettering. On the right side, a silver paper knife positioned exactly right. A partially melted candle sits in a copper holder, its wax perfectly still. You see the smudge on the glass pane. You made a mental note to wipe it down last week. It remains there. Do you understand why I've summoned you? You move your head from side to side. No, sir. He puts the documents aside, clasps his hands together. The record books are incomplete. A receipt entry. Monday's grocery invoice. It wasn't recorded properly. Your thoughts start racing. That falls under the housekeeper's responsibilities or the assistant butler's. But none of that is relevant. What's relevant is that you're standing right here. You start to say, but he lifts a single hand. It's been fixed now. But I need to be clear, when errors occur in one section of the household, they affect everything else. Silence, in the end, only shields the responsible party temporarily. You nod your head. It's not a reprimand. It's an instruction. One that isn't directed at you specifically, but you'll carry it regardless. He motions toward the side cabinet. Top up the ink. You cross the space in 3 silent steps. The ink container is almost dry, the glass edge marked with dried black stains. You lift it out, wipe it with the rag from your apron, pour the ink carefully from the bottle next to the ledger. You don't spill even a single drop. Behind you, he remarks, my father used to sit at this desk every single night without exception. Not once did a servant step into this room without being summoned. He believed a household should operate like a timepiece, tick by tick, not clatter by clatter. You return the ink container. He doesn't express gratitude, but he doesn't send you away yet either. You start to back away, cautious not to let your shoes scrape the flooring. As you get to the door, he continues, you're meticulous. Keep doing that, it's the nearest thing to approval you've ever gotten from him. Once outside, the corridor seems lighter, though you're aware it's not actually. The same wavering gaslight, the same quietness that presses against your ribs like corset boning. But now you hold the memory of that moment, that almost compliment, that fleeting adjustment in his tone. You go down the servant's staircase, steps gentle on the stone, but even now your thoughts drift back to the study, to the ink, to the record books, and to the reality that you were summoned not because you caused an error, but because somebody else had. And in this household, when another person makes a mistake, you're frequently the one who has to set it right. Back in the servants' common room, nobody questions where you disappeared to. That's another unspoken law. Here the household has countless of them, some voiced, most kept quiet. And this particular one is straightforward. When a servant gets called to the master's study and comes back without talking, you don't ask questions. You simply create space at the table and hand them the bread if they haven't had their meal. You sit down, you chew your food. You can't taste anything at all. The others are subdued this evening. The assistant footman is buffing the same collection of spoons for the 4th time. The housemaid from the eastern section is gazing into her tea as though it holds prophecies. A handful of the younger girls murmur near the stove, but their speech is fragile and exhausted. Nobody chuckles. Above your heads, the floor makes a creaking sound. Someone, likely the mistress, walks back and forth in the passage overhead. You can identify it by the rhythm. Deliberate, soft-souled, never hasty. The family's getting ready for some kind of occasion. You have no idea what, and nobody will inform you. You'll discover it only when the household's tempo changes once more and the chimes start to increase. You finish your tea and get to your feet. There are ledgers to verify now. Not your responsibility, but the type the head butler might allow you to glimpse if he's in a generous mood. And if you're going to be dragged into concerns beyond your station, you might as well get ready. But first, the crimson pages. You ascend the narrow stairs to the butler's storage room. He's absent, but the cabinet stands ajar. On the upper shelf, wrapped in weathered red leather, sits the household ledger of mistakes. The actual one, not the version they present to the family. This volume contains every error, shattered plates, singed fabric, wine turned sour, shipment short by a portion. Sometimes the mistakes are attributed, sometimes they're simply noted, quietly documented, identities left out. But every servant recognises who each entry refers to. You open it with immaculate hands. There it sits, close to the end. Monday grocery invoice not logged. Delivery discrepancy. Flagged by master, corrected, unnamed. No identity given, but you're certain it wasn't you. And somebody else is certain too. That's the risk of the red volume. It documents without charging anyone, but the quietness can still direct blame. You've witnessed a girl let go for a single line similar to that, not because it demonstrated wrongdoing, but because it provided no protection. You shut the ledger softly. The metal clasp snaps closed. Below, the washroom bell chimes. You put it back before anyone can discover it was touched. Later that night, the household appears to exhale more deeply. The doors whisper shut, the floors turn cool. The kitchen transitions into its after-hours pattern. Washing, scraping, reorganising. A day that's already coming apart at its seams. You ignite a candle and head back to the linen storage to refill the towels utilised in the guest section. The passageway is peaceful now, aside from the wind tapping against the glass. You progress slowly. your footsteps at last permitted to lighten. You pause by the study once more. The door is shut now. The glow underneath it is faint, dimming. You picture the master inside, pouring himself one last drink, straightening his documents, exactly so, certain the household has functioned precisely as it ought to, and in some way, he's correct. Everything has worked. The meals got served, the drapes pulled, the silverware buffed, the ink replenished. And nobody will ever realise that for it all to operate, you had to repair the things that weren't yours to damage. There is a ceremony to afternoon tea. Not simply the pouring, not simply the careful angle of the pot and the sound of spoon meeting china. No, in this household, tea is a rite, a show, an examination. And you're its silent orchestrator, the phantom behind the serving tray. You begin in the butler's storage area, where the silver service is stored under lock and silent distrust. You examine every piece, the teapot, the sugar container, the cream pitcher, the waste bowl, the mesh strainers. Each must shine, each must mirror the space like a still pond. No smears, no fingerprints, no trace of being touched by hands such as yours. The small spoons are assessed by touch, the cloth napkins creased into sharp, exact triangles, the lemon rounds sliced delicate enough to allow light through. In the kitchen, the pastries are ready. Scones, sponge biscuits, ginger cookies, and today, miniature eclairs that the cook created with a level of concentration typically saved for medical procedures. You position them on a 3-level serving stand, heaviest on the bottom tier, lightest on the top tier. There is a correct sequence. There is always a correct sequence. By the moment you climb to the parlour, your arms hurt from supporting the burden of refinement. You maintain your steps, uniform, your spine upright. You inhale through your nostrils. One mistake, and you won't be asked back to serve once more. Not because they'll scold you, because they'll erase you from memory. The parlour is adorned in gentle illumination and plush silence. The fireplace flickers softly. The mistress is seated already, a lace shawl arranged across her shoulders, her hair secured into a construction as delicate as spun sugar work. Her visitors sit in a half-circle, each in their favoured seat, each anticipating the instant they can transform their gloved fingers into polite requirements. You set the tray on the auxiliary table. You wait. The head butler steps in next, carrying the poise of a swan moving across hidden water. He raises the teapot, inspects the cups, gives you a look, a wordless nod that indicates continue. You start the service. You pour with both exactness and transparency. One visitor prefers milk before tea. Another demands no lemon, strictly honey. The third consistently forgets her preference and alters her choice midway through the pour. You adjust to all of them with an expression like undisturbed water, and the entire duration they converse. They converse about engagements and accidents, about how Lady Ashbury tumbled into a water feature and accused the groundskeeper, about how the minister's wife refuses to stop wearing velvet in the heat of summer, about how somebody's niece has started composing verses and wouldn't it be pleasant if she discovered something more useful to do? You maintain your expressions smooth. Sometimes their words drift toward your direction. Not directed at you, never at you. Just near enough to scorch. That one's rather tall for a housemaid, wouldn't you say? Do you imagine they receive instruction in how to stay silent? Her complexion's turned quite weathered. I expect it comes from the cleaning chemicals. You show no response. You maintain your hands unwavering as you offer the eclairs. You acknowledge with a slight bow when requested to add more milk. You erase the crumbs from the tablecloth before they have time to settle. You transform into part of the decor, because in this space, during tea time, you are permitted to be present, but never to be recognised. The tea has cooled by now, but nobody takes note. Or maybe they do, and simply elect not to mind. The discussion moves into its closing phase. the easy lull where voices drop and spoons rest softly against porcelain. You shift in silence, gathering the cups one at a time, each carrying the mark of a mouth that never addressed you face to face. One of the visitors has let a napkin fall. You bend down to collect it, only to catch a quiet laugh from behind you. It's not mean-spirited, not openly, but it settles somewhere deep in your chest all the same. You present the napkin with a lowered head, acting as though you didn't hear. The head butler steps in once more, right on schedule. His arrival signals the conclusion. The ladies stand gradually, like flower petals closing at evening, speaking softly as they drift toward the parlour entrance. The mistress stays behind, trailing her gloved finger along the chair's edge as though it captures her reflections. You hold back for her nod before picking up the tray. Once the space is vacant, the performance concludes, but the labour continues. You transport the tray back down the service stairway, each step groaning faintly under your burden. In the butler's storage room, the silver must be polished once more, the sugar tongs positioned exactly so. The fabric cloths checked for wandering tea particles or dim circles. One mark left unattended can turn into a crisis in the perception of this household. As you dry the final teacup, you detect a faint crack along the edge, almost invisible, but you register it regardless with a mental notation. The head butler will require notification. He maintains a record of replacements to order from the china dealer, alongside a quiet tally of which servant was most recently observed carrying what item. You sense your own identity lingering on that record. Perhaps not at this moment, perhaps not this week, but all it requires is one error, one cracked cup, one overlooked napkin, one chime left unanswered. In the servants' common area, the discussion of the tea service has commenced already. Did you notice how she continually changed what she wanted? Lemon and cream, then absolutely nothing. She's the one who let her spoon fall last Christmas and put the blame on Ellen, recall that. You allow the conversations to flow around you, strangely comforting. Down here, at minimum, the accounts are communal. The absurd transforms into standard. The upstairs visitors are enormous in the instant, but compact enough to become murmurs. By evening meal, you bundle the tea linens together and transport them to the wash area. They'll require soaking. The lace-edged one is beginning to yellow. It may not last another season. Neither you occasionally consider might you. But this evening at minimum, you survived. Afterward, right before the lights go out, you go back to your tiny room. You loosen your apron gradually, the material rigid with sugar residue and slight traces of citrus. You perch on the edge of the narrow bed and retrieve the folded picture once more. Not everyone perceives you, but someone managed to, and that's sufficient to make you unfold the fabric one final time and check every crease. Not because you're instructed to, but because in a household constructed on appearances, the tiniest details are the final things that belong to you. By the moment the dinner bell resonates through the household, you're already positioned, standing right outside the dining area doors, shoulders squared, hands clasped, expression blank. The footmen have assumed their stations at each side of the lengthy mahogany table, and the head butler has finished his ultimate inspection. Everything sparkles, everything anticipates, and then they step in, the family initially, dragging silk and stiffness, the mistress in purple, the master in his black dinner coat with the collar that cost more than your entire month's earnings. Their visitors trail behind, commenting admiringly on the candlelight, the flower displays, the aroma of cooked meats that has been deliberately contained to reach this space and only this space. Nobody registers you. That's the objective. Service commences with precision. Broth is served from the large bowl without a single splash. Wine gets poured without a single drip. Bread rolls get positioned in dishes with silver implements, never fingers. A glance from the head butler initiates your motion. A hardly noticeable nod instructs you to advance, then retreat. You're conditioned to observe but not perceive, to catch sounds but not absorb them. But this evening the discussion is sufficiently loud to penetrate the barriers. I understand Lady Montrose terminated her new housemaid already, someone remarks, carving into a glistening portion of goose. discovered her weeping in the garden. Can you imagine? I consistently maintain the capable ones don't experience feelings, another visitor responds, patting his mouth with a cloth. That's what makes them so dependable. Laughter erupts, delicate, fragile. You maintain your expression calm as you refill a wine glass. At the distant end of the table, the youngest visitor, a man just entering maturity, bends close to the woman next to him and murmurs something that makes her lift her eyebrows. She glances toward the footman, then toward you, and suppresses a smirk. You drop your gaze. This is the type of dinner that extends time itself. 7 dishes, countless silverware, a wave of plates that must flow seamlessly in and out without ever being acknowledged. For every plate positioned before them, there are 2 additional being washed below stairs. For every dish, a fire maintained, a tray arranged, a servant dispatched rushing. You bring in the following round of plates, roasted game birds and seasoned vegetables, and position them carefully next to the head butler. He serves with clinical exactness. The master compliments the preparation. The cook will learn about it third hand and nod a single time without displaying pleasure. The visitors recline, wine turning their complexions redder, their accounts lengthier. Someone relates a joke targeting a housemaid in a different household. You missed the opening, but the conclusion arrives clearly. And then she remarked, "I assumed the chamber pot was meant for flowers." Additional laughter. The master participates this time, and you experience something descend in your stomach. Not because it's harsh, but because it's commonplace, anticipated, the type of joke that endures because nobody dares suggest it's not amusing. The head butler's glance finds yours. You advance to collect the broth bowls. One of the visitors hands you his with a dramatic gesture, then mumbles, "Such agile hands." You must excel at needlework as well. You provide no answer, you simply nod your head. The visitor winks deliberately. The mistress observes it. Her smile grows tighter. You sense your body shrinking, becoming just a shadow in pressed cotton. But the tray in your grasp doesn't shake, not yet. The aroma of the roast continues to hover as you withdraw through the service entrance, tray in hand, steps soundless, breathing shallow. The burden isn't in the plates, it's in the statements, the glances, the invisible barbs thrown around the table and caught exclusively by those trained to intercept them. You transfer the tray to the junior kitchen girl, who remains speechless. She's crimson in the face from vapour and anxiety. A goose has charred somewhat. It won't be detected by the visitors, but it will be retained in memory by the cook, and retained even longer in the manner she portions stew. The next day you return to the dining area exactly in time for the sweet course. The head butler raises the dome with a dramatic motion, exposing an orange pudding formed into a dome decorated with crystallized peel gleaming beneath the gaslight. The visitors voice their appreciation. One woman applauds delicately, as though it were a theatrical illusion. She inquires how it was created. The mistress responds ambiguously, something about a talented girl in the kitchen, and abandons it there. Nobody references the hours devoted to whipping eggs, the burnt fingers from sugar solution, or the occasion the washgirl collapsed from standing too long at the cooking range. You refill the water glasses. The youngest daughter, silent all evening, observes you as you work, not with disdain, not exactly inquisitiveness either, just a type of reflective stillness. When you move behind her seat, she murmurs without turning, "I don't believe I could ever manage what you manage." You almost respond, almost. But then her mother speaks, pointed, "Sweetheart, don't recline backward." And the girl straightens like a pulled ribbon, her momentary defiance folded back into position. You complete gathering the dessert plates. Following the meal, the men withdraw to the smoking lounge, the women to the parlour. This section of the evening is more gradual, more uncertain. The chimes sound less frequently, but they're more pointed, more demanding. A missing ashtray, a glass of port not cooled sufficiently, a drape left 2 inches too far ajar. Below stairs you consume dinner with the other servants in a quick, weary quietness. It's bread and fish patties this evening. One is charred, nobody objects. You chew deliberately, eyes partially shut, listening to the sound of utensils scraping and the creak of warm seats. Then one final chime, late, unanticipated. You look at the wall indicator. It's from the parlour. You stand up, heart heavy, and proceed inside. The mistress sits by herself. Her visitors have retired for the night and she's removed her jewellery. One piece rests on the side table, shining like a small blade. She doesn't raise her eyes when you step in. "I've spilled my tea," she states. She has not. The cup is full and untouched. You comprehend. You gather the cup, wipe the saucer, fold the cloth, all without remark. This is the unvoiced ceremony of evening, these minor actions that signify nothing and everything. The mistress finally speaks once more. That young man at dinner, the one with the facial hair. He was behaving inappropriately. You registered it. You pause, then nod, just barely. Her eyes meet yours directly. You managed it well, discreetly. You don't respond. She looks elsewhere. Men never believe the help possesses eyes. You exit the space a moment afterward, steps unhurried, hands vacant but transporting far more than previously. Back in the corridor, the candlelight wavers against the framed paintings. Great-grandmothers in rigid collars, military men in red uniforms, all of them gazing forward, eternal and fixed. And you beneath them, transporting the shame, the accounts and the burden of a household that operates not on refinement, but on quietness. The household is more subdued now, but never truly quiet. It's just after 11. The visitors have retired to bed, their laughter substituted by muted coughs, shifting curtains, the remote thud of footwear kicked off in changing rooms. The gas lights are lowered. The corridors exhale in low, constant sighs. You're still in motion. The chime sounds once more. It's the mistress's chime this time. Late enough to be intimate, early enough to be troublesome. You're dispatched upward immediately, gripping a folded shawl and an expression of rehearsed composure. When you step into her space, she doesn't speak immediately. She's positioned in front of the looking-glass, hair brushed loose and flowing, a phantom of her daytime appearance. The candle wavers behind her. Her reflection observes you as you approach. She extends a letter. "Destroy this for me," she states. You accept it without glancing at the contents. That's another law. You never glance. You never understand. Back in the servants' common area, you slide it into the fireplace behind the kitchen stove where the ash remains hot and eager. The paper twists, blackens, disappears. A hint of fragrance remains, something floral and sharp. You brush the embers level and say nothing at all. There are accounts in this household that only the fire possesses. As you polish the final pieces of silver, quiet now, by yourself, you recall what occurred this exact time last week, another late-night summons. But that occasion it had been to wash out a stain in the guest quarters before the morning crew discovered it. The visitor never referenced it. The household never recognised it. But you retain the memory because it's perpetually your responsibility to undo what others would prefer to erase. You collect the laundry from outside the changing rooms, moving without shoes so your steps don't reverberate. The corridors are frigid now. The type of cold that coils around your ankles like a damp ribbon. The carpets are plush but worn thin through the centre, carved with the roots of 1,000 silent servants who came before you. In one space, you discover gloves abandoned on a seat. In another, a cufflink on the flooring. You restore them both to the vanities without a sound. If they're absent come morning, it will be your responsibility whether you touch them or not. You pause by the music room just to verify the fire. It's low but not extinguished. You stir it softly, encouraging back a glow, then restore the screen and exit without leaving any trace. Then the midnight chime. It's the one nobody prefers to answer. You brace yourself and proceed. It's the master. He's positioned at his desk in shirt sleeves, a decanter half-drained beside him, a solitary glass in his grip. He doesn't raise his eyes when you step in. "The fire's died down," he states. "Take care of it." You kneel at the hearth. The embers are grey. You move fast without sound. Paper to start the fire, coal-stained fingers, face carefully empty. Behind you, the master gazes at nothing, like he's measuring something you can't see. You feel it coming before he talks. "How long have you been here?" 2 years, sir." He nods slow, longer than most last. You wait. Silence is safer. At last he says, "That'll be enough." You stand, lower your head, and go. The door shuts with barely a whisper, but your heart still pounds hard in your chest. In this place, the bell can mean everything. A rap, a fire, a request, a firing, and sometimes something entirely different. You go down the back steps with the kind of care that only years of doing this can give you. Skipping the third one that always creaks, touching the wall so your shadow won't show in the upper hallway, keeping your candle down to miss the glass on that oil painting at the bottom. The scullery door sits partly open. Inside, the undermaid sleeps at the table, head on her folded arms, apron still knotted, shoes half kicked away. You don't disturb her. That's another rule too. When someone finally rests, leave them be. You put your candle back on the pantry shelf and stand quiet for a bit. You close your eyes. Just a second. But you know not to stay frozen too long. There's always another thing needing attention. Tonight it's the fire in the servants' hall. It's almost dead, just a mound of grey ash in the grate. You build it back slowly, carefully, each piece of coal set like a vow. The heat comes back, weak at first, then steady. You stretch your hands toward it, palms split and pink from soap, nails scrubbed down to nothing. You could rest now, you should. But your body stays tight from the summons to the master's study. You're not foolish. You recognise that tone. You know how it starts with a cold hearth, a soft question, a glass half drunk. And you know how it finishes. You think about the parlour-maid last spring, summoned after dinner. She came back pale and silent. Nothing got said. But 2 weeks on, she was gone. No letter of reference, no heads up, just gone. You never questioned it. Nobody did. Because in this place, safety isn't something you earn. It's something you borrow, and the cost is high. You take out your sewing kit and fix the bottom of your apron, not because it can't wait, but because it keeps your hands busy, something quiet, something productive. One stitch at a time, the world shrinks down, becomes handleable, a thread line where everything stays together. A creak from upstairs cuts the quiet. A board maybe, or a door. You freeze your breathing. Then nothing. You go back to sewing. The hall clock strikes 1 around you. The house sinks into deeper rest. The mice start their nightly runs behind the walls. The kettle goes cold. The wood settles. The day packs itself away. You put the sewing aside and get up slow, knees hurting. You gather your apron, your cap, your tray. You walk across the hallway to your cupboard room and shut the door soft behind you. Inside, the air is stale and known. Your narrow bed, your hook for coats, your box of keepsakes under the cot, the child's picture, the blue ribbon, the dried flower. You don't light the candle. You know the room by touch. You lay down still dressed, just for a moment, and in the darkness you wonder if anyone upstairs is awake still. If the mistress dreams of Paris, if the child dreams of cats, if the master, glass in hand, stares at the fire with thoughts he'd never say out loud. You don't know. You only know that if the bell sounds again, you'll respond. The house is still wrapped in sleep when the bell sounds again. Not one of the delicate upper bells from the drawing room or parlour. This one comes from the service hall, the sharp single ring of the scullery bell. Pressing, jarring, unscheduled. You're on your feet before your brain fully catches up. Nobody else has moved yet. Or if they have, they're acting like they can't hear. You splash cold water on your face from the bowl, pull on your apron and slip through the door. In the kitchen, the air is bitter with last night's dinner leftovers. Bone pieces, hardened grease. A pot left half filled with gravy that's grown a white film now. The scullery maid stands by the hearth, white and shaking, holding a broken plate in both trembling hands. "It fell," she whispers. "I didn't mean to." You take it gently from her. A thin crack splits the china straight through. It hasn't broken apart yet, but the crack will widen the second it gets washed. And this plate belongs to the finest china set, the one with the gold edge that only appears when the master has very special guests. You don't lecture her. She's 16, new, skin still tender, hands unmarked. You remember what those first weeks feel like, the fear that hums in your chest with every clang of silverware. You hide the plate behind the bread box for now. You'll mention it later, after the house wakes up, when the cook is too swamped to care, when the butler is busy with the wine cellar count. A broken plate can be forgiven, a scene can't. The girl breathes out shakily, relieved. You hand her a cloth and tell her to shine the brass handles on the oven. She nods, thankful to have direction. That's what most of you want down here. Instructions are simpler than guessing. Later, as the kitchen fires get stoked and the morning bread rises in the heat, you scrub the stone floors, not because anyone asked you to, but because somebody has to. The scullery water splashes over your shoes, your hem drinks up the dirt. The mop is coming apart at the edges, and your hands hurt from gripping the wood handle. But you work fast, before the cook arrives, before the butler checks the pantry, before anyone upstairs thinks of you at all. And just as you empty the last bucket, the housemaid rushes in from the back hall, out of breath. "They're sending her out," she gasps. "Who?" "The girl who broke the perfume bottle." You blink. That was 3 days back. You figured she'd been scolded, told to be more cautious, maybe move to shining brass or cleaning boots. "Gone?" you ask. The housemaid nods. No reference. No reference means no work. No work means no place to stay. No place to stay means nowhere. You feel the mop handle slide a little in your grip. It doesn't matter that she was nice, that she once shared the last roll when you missed dinner, that she hummed while scrubbing the main stairs just loud enough to make you grin. She's gone, and the bell that rings now from the breakfast room expects somebody else to fill her spot. You drop the mop, straighten your skirt, and head toward it. The breakfast bell rings again before you reach the dining room. 2 quick pulls. That means it's the master and he's not patient. You take the side route, brushing past the narrow stairway that goes to the footman's quarters. Someone left their boot brush out again. You tuck it under the rail without pausing. If the butler spots it, there'll be a speech. Not for whoever left it, but for everybody. In the breakfast room, sunlight pours through tall windows. The table is partly set, toast holder in place, silver gleaming, cloth pressed. The eggs are soft boiled. The bacon just barely curled, the way he likes. And yet the master stands at the table's head, frowning into his teacup like it's offended him. You enter silent, head slightly down. "The cream," he says. "It's warm." You glance at the small pitcher, still wet with chill, cold when it left the pantry but now room temperature, maybe just. He doesn't lift his voice. He doesn't have to. "I want cold cream with my breakfast," he adds without looking your way. You nod, take the tray, and turn back to the kitchen. Behind you, the mistress sips her tea, eyes on the paper. She says nothing. Downstairs, the pantry girl is crying. She'd set the pitcher by the window while arranging the jam jars, and the sun warmed it a bit. You don't lecture her. You just get another pitcher, fill it with fresh cream, add a bit of crushed ice, and bring it back within a minute. When you set it before him, the master grunts. Better. It's not praise, it's a truce. You disappear again. In the hall, the butler is checking the flower arrangement for the table centre. It's too broad, he says. Guests need to see each other without stretching. He pulls out a piece of fern and hands it to you. Throw it out, he says, already walking away. You pass the scullery maid near the food lift. She's still red-faced from before. You press the fern into her hand. Keep it, you whisper. Hang it above your bed. It smells good. She looks at it like it's jewellery. By mid-morning, you're cleaning the morning room fireplace. The ashtray is full, the grate marked with soot. You roll up your sleeves and start in. The ironwork is fine, decorative, little flowers and vines that catch the cloth and rip at your gloves. As you work, your mind wanders to the girl who got sent out. You imagine her room, bare with one wobbly chair and a straw bed. You remember how she used to whistle while starching collars. You remember her laugh, soft but certain. And you remember how fast she disappeared. No bag, no goodbye. She's been replaced already. A new girl shows up this evening, they always do. You finish scrubbing, brush the coal dust off your apron and step back to check your work. The fireplace shines. The flowers on the shelf haven't shifted. And in this short, flickering moment, the room feels calm. You know it won't hold. The next bell is only minutes off. Another spilled drink, another lost glove, another error waiting to occur. But right now, you breathe out. You let yourself be. Just for one beat. Then the bell rings. The bell this time isn't from the drawing room or the master's study or even the side entrance. It's the laundry bell. Your feet argue as you go down the worn steps toward the damp centre of the house, the laundry cellar. The air gets heavier the deeper you go, thick with steam and the sharp smell of soap and sweat. You push the door open and the heat slams into your chest. The laundry room is its own universe. The copper boiler in the corner bubbles like a pot of potion. Lines of cloth hang on tight strings overhead. Starch jars sit on the shelf, some hardened like candle wax, others half melted into sticky globs. A fog clings to everything. Your eyelashes get damp, your skin coats with moisture. The laundry mistress is flushed and angry. She shoves a pile of wrinkled cloth into your arms. Third footman's shirts. He sent them down wadded like kitchen rags. Tell him if he wants the creases pressed right, he'd better unfold them first. You nod, knowing you won't deliver the message. Rank matters even among the barely paid. You sort the pile and start with the collars. The irons sit on the stove, thick-handled, darkened with age. You test one, wince, then wrap the handle in a rag. A second too long on the fabric and the cloth burns. A second too short and the starch won't stick. It's a harsh rhythm. Press, dip, press, wipe, breathe, switch. The shirt fronts have to gleam like stone. The cuffs have to be so rigid they crackle when folded. The collars have to stand on their own, straight as guards, and heaven help you if one buckle sits wrong. You look across the room where the younger girls scrub sheets at the stone basins, arms sunk elbow deep in soapy water. They lean with their whole bodies, knuckles pale. One girl bites her bottom lip to stop from whimpering. Her fingertips are bloody. You once heard the cook joke that if a girl survives her first winter in the laundry, she'll outlast the house itself. At the time, you chuckled. Now you're less certain. Between shirts, you take a second to stretch your fingers. Your knuckles pop. A pulse throbs behind your left eye. You're not ill, just exhausted. Always exhausted. You soak a cloth in cold water and press it to your temples. It smells slightly of lavender. A remnant from the last rinse. A tiny grace like the cookie you saved yesterday, like the tulip pressed in your prayer book. The laundry mistress claps her hands. Time for the tablecloths, large ones. You sigh inside. Those monsters take 3 pairs of arms to handle and a patience carved from rock. You get started. The tablecloths are folded like burial shrouds, heavy and limp with moisture. You and 2 other maids spread one across the huge, pressing table, smoothing every wrinkle like you're calming a wild thing. The floral pattern catches the dim light, glowing faintly, its design pressed into the fabric like phantom vines. "Corners first," someone mutters, and you all drop into rhythm. It's an odd, wordless dance. Fold, lift, lower, press. The iron hisses with each touch, leaving sharp edges behind. Nobody talks unless something rips or scorches. This cloth is for the master's formal dinner on Thursday. Special guests, someone from the Bank of England or the Colonial Office. So the silver has to sparkle and the cloth has to drape perfectly over the wood, like snow on stone. Any burn mark, any crooked hem. And somebody will catch blame. Not the butler, not the footman, not the cook. You. You reach for the starch jar. It's running low again. You scrape along the bottom with a wooden paddle, gathering what's left. It smells faintly of rice and sweat. A girl once whispered that some places mix starch with rice water and formaldehyde. "Keeps it stiffer," she'd said with a smirk, like a corpse's collar. You're too tired to laugh. Next to you, the new girl, barely 15, fresh from the countryside, starts humming under her breath. It's an old song, something country and lilting. For a moment the heat disappears and you remember the hills outside your grandmother's cottage, where the sheets dried on bushes and the air smelled of pine. But that was a lifetime ago. A lifetime ago. Someone snaps. No singing, and the sound stops. After the last tablecloth is folded and piled, the laundry mistress nods and disappears into her office. The rest of you drop onto the cool stone bench by the water tank, faces red, hands limp. Nobody speaks, even blinking takes effort. You look at your fingernails, pink at the tips, white underneath. The grooves are deeper than last week. Your mother once told you to watch your nails. They show the blood, the bones, the breath of a woman. You don't need a mirror to know what yours reveal. Now. You drink from a tin cup passed around. The water's lukewarm. It tastes faintly of metal. Then the hallway bell rings again. You glance up. It's not yours, not the laundry's. But habit makes you shift. And as you pass the row of fresh cloths, you catch your reflection in the iron pot's side, distorted, sweating, older than you recall. A breath, a pause, then you're off, heading back up the stone steps, back into the house that never stops wanting you. You barely make it to the top of the stairs before the hallway's stillness reminds you you've lost track of the bell's reason, and that's risky. You listen hard, footsteps above, a voice distant, then quiet again. You're not wanted, not called, yet you move like you are. This is what the house trains. You never wait to be summoned, guess ahead, slip in before the need fully takes shape in their heads. Be so smooth. You blend into the walls. At the landing you meet the second housemaid, Alice. She's carrying a tray of crystal glasses, tilting slightly as she hurries toward the morning room. You whisper, "Was it the bell for the drawing room?" Alice nods, serious. Lady Ethel wants a glove mended. You turn left, not right. Lady Ethel is the oldest daughter, 21, brittle, tight, and very conscious of her status. She's already returned 3 pairs this month for having unrefined seams. You've heard her declare, without irony, that rough stitching gives her migraines. You enter the drawing room softly. She lounges by the fire, surrounded by spools of embroidery thread, her shoes resting on a velvet cushion. She holds a pair of pearl-coloured gloves in one hand like something dead, and doesn't glance up as you come near. "These are incorrect," she says simply. You take them, bowing your head. The left seam is slightly lifted, less than a hair's width. You fight the urge to mention her own habit of pulling at her rings, which probably caused the tear. Instead you curtsy and promise to fix them quickly. Outside you tuck the gloves under your apron and head toward the sewing room. It's a cramped attic space beside the linen closet where the light angles in strangely and dust particles float in silence. You sit by the window with your needle and thread, fingers already aching, wrists hurting from the laundry work earlier. The gloves are fragile, lambskin, cream-tinted, ridiculously soft. One wrong tug and the skin will split. You breathe deep and start. The sewing is quiet, focused. In another world it might even be soothing, but here there's no rest, only speed. You know the bell will ring again before the final knot gets tied. As you work, you listen. A door shifts. Somewhere below, a cup touches a saucer. The grandfather clock in the hall strikes 2. You realise you haven't eaten since morning, not that you'd register it. Hunger feels different now, not sharp, just constant and low, like the ache of tight shoes or damp sheets. You finish the seam, double-check the edges, then fold the gloves into gentle curves. You whisper a hope that they'll satisfy this time. You return to Lady Ethel. She examines them without a word, then tosses them onto the armrest. "You may leave," she says, and you do quietly, already erasing yourself from the room. Downstairs, the sewing girl asks how it went. You just smile and say, "Better than last time." She nods, like she understands what that means, because she does. The gloves are forgotten by the time you reach the scullery, but your hands still feel the texture of lambskin. You rub your fingers against your apron, trying to lose the feeling. Soft, slippery, too pristine for a world like this. The scullery maid glances up from the sink as you come in. "There you are," she huffs. "Parlour needs polishing. The brass. Every piece." Naturally it does. The parlour's brass includes a fireplace fender, curtain rods, candle holders, the bell cord, the mail slot, and the knobs on every cabinet and drawer. You once tallied them. 32 separate pieces. If you skip even one, somebody will see. Maybe not immediately, but eventually. And when they do, they won't point. They'll sigh. That's always worse. You grab the cloths, the brick powder and the vinegar bottle. Your knees complain as you drop to the floor in front of the hearth. You've been kneeling so much lately that your stockings are wearing thin at the kneecaps, and the skin underneath has turned a pale, lasting red. The first wipe of vinegar brings water to your eyes. It burns, sour and biting. The brass is dull, layered with soot. You start to polish. Small, tight circles, knuckle to cloth to metal. You fall into a rhythm. Circle, breathe, shift, repeat. Outside the window, the garden is bathed in the low gold of late afternoon. Sunlight angles across the parlour floorboards, catching specks of dust in its beam. For a moment, you let your eyes wander, just for a moment, and think of a time when you played outside after school. Your knees muddy, not from work, but from games. Someone coughs behind you. You snap back to work. The curtain rod is next. You stand, step up on the side stool, and stretch just enough to reach the brass ends. Your balance wavers once, then twice. You clench your teeth and lean into it. If you fall and shatter a vase, you'll lose a month's pay. Maybe your job. You push harder. As you reach for the final holder, you spot something strange. An old drawing, a child's scribble tucked behind the drapes. Faded, nearly invisible. A house with smoke, a stick figure with a crown. Maybe from one of the younger children before they got shipped off to school. Maybe from a nursery maid long gone. You smile, just barely, then wipe the brass. By the time you're done, your shoulders burn and your fingers are stained red. The smell of vinegar sticks to your skin, your apron, your hair. You step back. The room glows now, gold in the fading light, surfaces shining like they were made of money. Nobody will mention it, nobody ever does, but you'll know. You'll remember the sting in your eyes, the wobble of the stool, the drawing behind the curtain. It'll be dark soon and there are still shoes to shine. The lamps are being lit when you get back to the hallway. A soft golden light flickers across the wallpaper and shadows stretch like lazy cats along the floorboards. For a moment it feels almost calm, until your eyes land on the boot rack. Polishing time. There are 12 pairs. Master's dress shoes, the younger son's hunting boots, Lady Ethel's buttoned ankle boots, and a few guest pairs from earlier in the week, lined up like a jury, waiting for verdict. You crouch before them, gathering your supplies. The horsehair brush, the beeswax tin, a square of flannel, and that little bit of spit for shine. Yes, spit. There's no shame in it anymore. Everybody does it. You once heard a footman say a splash of champagne gives the same gleam. You'll have to trust his word on it. You start with the hunting boots. They're scuffed badly around the toes, covered in dried mud from some weekend walk across wet fields. You chip off the worst with a dull knife before putting wax in small, careful circles. You've done this so many times, your fingers work by instinct, like embroidery in reverse. The smell is rich, leather and beeswax, earthy and ancient. You always find it calming in an odd way, like something solid that doesn't shift, unlike moods, menus or Monday schedules. Midway through the second pair, your thoughts drift. You think of Mr. Foster, the valet who used to handle these. He taught you the triple shine method. He's gone now, let go after the scandal with the chambermaid, or so the rumours go. Nobody says his name aloud anymore, but his shoes still sit in the cupboard, unclaimed. You move on to Lady Ethel's boots. You despise these. Lace up 20 eyelets per side, all needing a damp cloth and gentle touch. The leather is calfskin, so thin it squeaks under pressure. Once you snapped a lace and had to replace it with a spare from a boot 2 sizes too large. She never noticed. You pause and stretch your back. It cracks like dry branches. You're still only halfway through. As you reach for the flannel, the hallway clock strikes 7. Upstairs, laughter. The family is dressing for dinner. You're dressing shoes. The last pair shines beneath your hands, smooth and obedient, the way you wish your own skin could be. Your nails are rimmed in wax, fingertips smudged dark as coal. But the shoes, oh, they shine like black mirrors. You can see the hallway lamp reflected in the curve of the toe, a perfect illusion of grace achieved on the back of cracked knuckles and silent knees. You line the pairs back into position, left, right, toes facing out like soldiers ready for inspection. Then you reach into your apron pocket and pull out the soft cloth. You've saved your own small scrap of luxury, not for boots, but for your hands. You rub at the wax marks, not to erase them, but to remind your skin that it's still yours. Down the hall, the dining room bell rings. It's the start of the evening meal. 5 courses, 3 wines, and twice as many disruptions. The footmen take the lead here, gliding plates and pouring wine, but you're not exempt. Any slowness in clearing dishes or bringing fresh napkins, and eyes, will turn not to them, but to you. You head toward the butler's pantry, where the staging starts. Steam from the kitchen clouds the tiny windows. Silver covers gleam under candlelight waiting to be carried across the wood floor. Tonight's menu includes lamb with mint sauce. You know because you sliced the lemons for the garnish at noon, and your hands still hold the sting. As you pass the kitchen, you catch Cook grumbling about the cream dessert. "Too loose," she says, tapping it with a spoon. "Won't hold on the plate." You say nothing. This is not your battle. You have your own. In the pantry, you refill the salt dishes, tiny cut glass things that hold just enough for one insult if knocked over. You stack fresh napkins, fold them with care, triangles sharp as collars. And you check the dessert forks again because Mrs. Greaves once spent an hour lecturing you after the Earl got 2 matching forks instead of mismatched silver. It ruined the balance, she'd said, dead serious. When the first course gets cleared, you slip in to collect the plates. The dining room is warm, humming with low talk and the occasional clink of crystal. You move silently behind chairs, collecting with practiced ease. One plate still has half its soup left. Another shows signs of a guest scraping too much butter. You file these things away. They matter. Back in the scullery, the dishes come fast. Clatter, rinse, stack, repeat. You dry your hands once, then quit. The towel's too wet, the work too constant. By the time the final spoon is polished and stored, the house is quieter. The dining room empties. The guests move to the drawing room. The footmen are preparing for brandy. And you? Well, you are invisible again, exactly where you should be. You check your apron pocket one last time. The waxcloth is still there. Small mercies. Outside. The wind taps gently against the glass. You have 1 hour before bed, enough time to fix your stocking. It's late now. Not just clock late, but bone late. The kind of tired that sinks into your marrow and whispers, stay still. But stillness is a luxury you don't possess. Your last task of the day waits in the attic. You climb the back stair quietly, worn soles on wood, carrying a tin box under your arm and a candle stub in your hand. This staircase isn't for family, not for guests. It creaks without shame, curls tight as a seashell, and smells faintly of damp wool and plaster. The linen room waits at the top. It's not much of a room, just beams, low walls, and stacks of fabric bundled into shapes that look like furniture. You lower the candle into its holder and settle beside the big wooden press. That's where the evening's final work begins. Linen folded, counted, repaired. You open the tin box and pull out the household record. Each item, tablecloth, towel, bedsheet, is marked in thin ink. If one is missing, you'll spend hours backtracking, even if the truth is simply that the butler's napkin slipped behind the wine rack. Again, you run your finger down the entries, cross-checking each folded square, whispering the numbers like a charm to keep your mind intact. 6 linen towels, 14 napkins, 3 antimacassars. The word still makes you smile. Antimacassar, a lace cover designed to protect chairs from men's hair oil. That's the world you inhabit. Protection for the chairs, never the maids. As you fold a lace-edged tablecloth, your fingers catch on a tear near the seam. You hold it up to the candlelight, examining the split. It's not wide, but it'll spread if ignored. You thread a needle and start to mend, stitch by careful stitch, the way your mother taught you before you left home. Though the cloth back then was your own, not someone else's. Downstairs, the house breathes out. Doors click shut. A coal bucket scrapes faintly. Somewhere, someone coughs and shifts in their bed. The great machine of the house is powering down minute by minute. You sew on. A lace napkin next, stained faintly with wine. You rub at it with vinegar, then fold it gently, hiding the faint mark in a neat little triangle. You hope nobody notices. They usually do. A breeze nudges the shutter behind you. Dust rises in the candlelight, and for a second you picture it not as dirt but as ash, the remains of hours of effort burned, of yourself scattered. You shake the thought away and press the final sheet into the pile. Only one thing left to do. You rise slowly, your knees protesting as you lift the folded linen stack and return the record to its box. The room groans as you move. The beams, the floorboards, your own spine. Everything in this house has a voice if you listen close, and you've learned to hear them all. The candle flickers as you go down the attic stairs, casting your shadow long and crooked along the wall. You pass the servant bedrooms, each marked by plain doors and silence. A pair of boots sits outside, one damp from the morning's cold. You'll have to remind Elsie not to leave them like that, or mould will crawl in through the stitching. Back in your own narrow room, you shut the door with a click. No lock, naturally. Privacy is more theory than reality here. Your bed is small, iron frame, thin mattress, but it's yours. The blankets hold the shape of your body, like memory foam made of exhaustion. You set the linen on the chest at the foot, blow out the candle, and sit in the dark for a moment. You peel off your apron, your cap, your shoes. Each layer removed feels like uncorking something long held. You run your hands over your arms, then your legs, checking for bruises from lifting trays or burns from the tea kettle. None tonight. A small victory. You lie back and close your eyes, but sleep doesn't arrive yet. Your mind won't allow it. Instead, it replays the day in reverse. Boots, cream dessert, button hooks, bell cords. It loops through each task, searching for mistakes. Did you forget the silver salt spoon? Did you underfill the coal bucket? Did someone notice the wine stain? You open your eyes. A sliver of moonlight stretches across the ceiling like lace. You trace it with your gaze until your heart slows. Tomorrow, the same again, and the day after, and the one after that. But for now, right now, your body is still, and in this short, borrowed silence, you are nobody's servant. You're only yourself. And now, as your mind drifts gently from the polished shoes and clinking teacups of that faraway house, you start to feel the weight lift. The stairs grow quieter, the hallways dim. The bustle of trays and ticking clocks fades into soft hums and distant echoes. Let your breath settle, slow and even. You've walked the floors, folded the cloths, and lit the lamps. You've whispered your way through shadows and candlelight, through boot rooms and sculleries, and now you're here, wrapped in warmth and calm. The world of the Victorian servant may have been built on order and obligation, but tonight you've simply wandered through it like a curious ghost, watching, understanding, gently letting go. No more bells to answer, no more soot to scrub, just a quiet room, a soft bed, and the sound of your breath. Feel the softness under your back, the heaviness in your limbs, the way your thoughts are curling in on themselves like folded fabric, each one stacked neatly, each one ready to be put away. And somewhere, far off, a lace curtain stirs in the breeze. You are safe, you are warm, you are home.